deranged and illegal. 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. Have we all collectively waved goodbye to the rule of law, and are we transitioning to an era of martial law in America?
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll hear from former Boston Globe editor Brian McGrory, now heading the journalism department at BU. We'll talk about the media's role in covering how the President of the United States may have manufactured a crisis to justify the violent crackdown on the streets of a major U.S. city. We'll talk about that, plus the latest on ICE raids right here in the Commonwealth. It's all ahead, 11 o'clock hour at BPR on GBH and any PM.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Los Angeles police have declared the city's downtown area off limits. There were growing clashes over the weekend between protesters and federal immigration agents after sweeping immigration raids last Friday. Now, President Trump has deployed hundreds of members of the National Guard to L.A. California Governor Gavin Newsom says Trump did it without his cooperation. Speaking to MSNBC last night, Governor Newsom says he will sue.
Well, look, Donald Trump has created the conditions you see on your TV tonight. He's exacerbated the conditions. He's, lit the proverbial match. He's putting fuel on this fire ever since he announced he was taking over the National Guard. An illegal act, an immoral act, an unconstitutional act, and we're going to test that theory with a lawsuit tomorrow.
Trump has hinted that he will watch what happens in other cities besides Los Angeles. The president has seemed to allude to the possibility that he could send in troops to other cities. Ukraine's Air Force says Russian forces launched one of their largest strikes on Ukraine overnight since the war started. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv. Russia has recently stepped up attacks to retaliate against a Ukrainian operation that damaged Russian bomber planes.
There were no reported casualties in the strike despite its scale. Ukraine says Russia attacked using nearly 500 drones and missiles. Air Force spokesman Yuri Ignat said most were shot down by Ukraine's air defense. Ignat says Russia targeted one of Ukraine's military airfields in the latest attack. Last week, Ukraine says it used small drones hidden in trucks to hit dozens of Russian military aircraft, including bombers, in airfields as far away as Siberia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he expects more retaliatory attacks from Russia and is urging Ukrainians to heed air raid warnings. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
Trade officials from the U.S. and China are in London today for a fresh round of trade negotiations. These will include tariffs imposed by both countries that caused global trade to stall in April. The meeting comes after President Trump spoke with Chinese President Xi last week. NPR's Fatima Al-Kassab has more.
3 of President Trump's top trade officials are in London for talks with senior Chinese officials. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng will represent Beijing. The last time the two sides gathered for talks in Geneva last month, the two countries agreed to a 90-day lowering of tariffs. This put a pause on the more than 100% tariffs each country had levied on the other. But relations have since taken a turn for the worse. Both sides accuse the other of violating the Geneva deal, and world leaders and investors will be watching to see if talks in London can help diffuse tensions between the world's two biggest economies. Fatima Al-Kassab, NPR News, London.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down 100 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, one of 22 Democratic governors who signed on to a statement pushing back against President Trump's decision to deploy the California National Guard to respond to protests against immigration raids in and around Los Angeles. The statement, whose signees include New York Governor Kathy Hochul and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, calls the move an alarming abuse of power, went on to say that the governors are commanders-in-chief of their National Guard and that the federal government activating them within a state's borders without consulting or working with the governor is ineffective and it's dangerous. The statement also denounced the potential deployment of U.S. Marines, something that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said is a possibility. Meanwhile, members of the Massachusetts chapter of 5051 and several SEI union members have organized a protest for 2 this afternoon on City Hall Plaza At issue are those ICE raids in Los Angeles and the deployment of the California National Guard, not to mention the possible call-out of the Marines. Also adding the protest caused the fact that ICE has been holding a Los Angeles SEIU leader who is an American citizen. In sports, Red Sox host the Tampa Bay Rays at friendly Fenway tonight. Cloudy and low 60s today. We've got scattered showers and 50s overnight. Looks like rain on tap for tomorrow. Don't have to water the garden. High near 70 degrees, sunny mid-80s on Wednesday. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to BPR on GBH and NEPM. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday, and on June 25th from 11 to noon. We're going to be joined by the Governor, Maura Healey. Hello, Jim.
Hello. And before we start, by the way, I know you're going to mention this during your two more things right before the 1 o'clock news. Marjorie and I were lucky enough to be at the 30th anniversary concert of Keith Lockhart's leadership of the Boston Pops. We actually hosted the after event, which was a thrill. It was spectacular from beginning to end.
Well, I am going to mention, I think sometimes people forget this national treasure. You were talking about the Tony Awards last night on television out of Broadway. Yeah. It's like going to a Broadway production to see the Boston
Pops. It's incredible.
The talent there, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, if you don't know about the great opportunity to go there and see incredible talent.
And also, what a 3 decades by Keith Lockhart.
Oh my God, Keith Lockhart! He's going to host the show this fall.
He's going to fill in.
Yeah,
yes,
we're very excited.
I think
you should fill in with me, Jim.
We'll see. We start today with yet another action from the Trump administration that pushes the limits of what American presidential authority means and what we're all willing to put up with. This weekend, as you know, the president called in the National Guard to respond to protests in California without the consent of California's governor, Gavin Newsom. Last time a president did this without the consent of a governor was 60 years ago when JFK sent in the National Guard to Alabama to desegregate the schools. A little bit different here. Here's Governor Newsom sounding the alarm on TV last night.
Donald Trump has created the conditions you see on your TV tonight. He's exacerbated the conditions. He's, lit the proverbial match. He's putting fuel on this fire ever since he announced he was taking over the National Guard. An illegal act, an immoral act, an unconstitutional act, and we're going to test that theory with a lawsuit tomorrow.
So let's go back to why these protests unfolded the way they have. The Trump administration ramped up immigration actions in L.A. Witnesses on Friday and Saturday saw federal agents across the city spread the word. Protests grew organically, similar but obviously much larger scale to the community response we talked about in Worcester and elsewhere throughout Massachusetts. Masked federal agents refusing to identify themselves while taking disappearing people off the streets in blue-leaning cities. So our lines are open at 877-301-8970. This is the beginning of a manufactured crisis, laying the groundwork for Trump to, in domestic disputes, bring in the National Guard in blue states, maybe ultimately invoking the Insurrection Act and instituting martial law. Or is this a distraction so our eyes are all on California while Trump's greatest wealth transfer, maybe in the history of the United States, makes its way through Congress? Or is it both? The number is 877-301-8970. Almost every time we talk about a Trump thing, there are people who call the show, text Joe, willing to say that's a big nothing. I refuse to believe that people believe sending in the National Guard without the approval of that state's governor in what is a local dispute that the police, both local and state, can handle is just incredible. You know, I assume people remember Trump wanted to send in the military to Lafayette Park, across Lafayette Square, across the street from the White House.
General Milley.
And it was only because General Milley and Secretary of Defense, we had on the show, Esper, stopped him. Right. And unfortunately, there are no Espers and there are no Millies in this administration. And the notion that the military, by the way, it is not far-fetched to think they could have been in Worcester. They could have been in Chelsea. He hates Massachusetts. He hates Healy. He hates Wu. I mean, mean, this is horrible.
Well, I think what's going on, Stephen Miller, his immigration man, has told ICE they need to be up to 3,000 deportations a day, and that's a lot of people, and the only way they're going to be able to do that is to go into places where people work, and that's what they were doing, going into a garment place and hauling people out of there. But we also should remember that the National Guard were in L.A. in 1992. That was after the Rodney King, where 4 police officers were acquitted after a camcorder captured police officers beating the you-know-what out of Rodney King over and over and over again. But that's when the governor, Pete Wilson, asked them to come in because...
Republican governor,
that's a good point. Because at that point, the demonstrations, protests, and the rioting and the looting was going on all over Los Angeles. As a couple of the reporters that were on the scene yesterday said, this was at one section of Los Angeles. You could have gone about your regular business in other sections of Los Angeles. The size of it was much less, and those protests went on for days over the Rodney King verdict.
I want to play one more soundbite from Governor Newsom, or in the typical childlike low-rent fashion, when Trump posts on Truth Social something about what he's doing, he refers to Governor Newsom, who I think was elected by the people of California, as Governor Newscum, because that childish... That's one of us doing something we shouldn't have done with our phones. I won't say who it was, Marjorie. Here is Newsom again, calling Trump a stone-cold liar. I think this is on MSNBC, for failing to mention his plan to deploy the National Guard during a long phone call they had just Friday night. Listen up.
Well, we talked for almost 20 minutes, and this issue never came up. I mean, I kept trying to talk about L.A. He wanted to talk about all these other issues. We had a very decent conversation.
When was this?
This was late Friday night, I think about 1:30 plus his time.
After the protests had started?
After the protests, and he never once brought up the National Guard. He's a stone-cold liar. He said he did. Stone-cold liar.
So what's your reaction to this thing? We don't have to get into the Newsom well, I guess we do, because he didn't get the approval, nor did he seek the approval or even request the approval of Governor Newsom. This is so scary. And do you think I'm exaggerating to suggest this could happen in Worcester had it been a little bit larger, or in Chelsea with that situation that we've talked about many times? It could be anywhere. I mean, this is a test case, I think, to see what the reaction is. And he'll use the military, the National Guard, wherever he deems it politically advantageous. Don't you think?
No, I absolutely think if he's willing to override what the mayor of the city thinks, what the governor thinks, the fact that it didn't rise anywhere close to the level of the instances where a president has inserted federal power over the wishes of the local officials, I think it could absolutely happen there. And it's important to point out that I think the biggest riot any of us have seen in recent history is the riot at the Capitol, when people that were urged by Trump, went back and attacked the Capitol. And I didn't hear Donald Trump was still the president at that point, was he not?
Yes.
He could have called out the National Guard.
Well, remember the whole Nancy Pelosi dispute. We don't have to go back, and I agree with you about
the Nancy
January 6th.
Pelosi thing was not true. But he could have called out the National Guard then, and he did not.
Let's start with Karen in Newton. Karen, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, longtime listener and sometimes caller.
Thank you.
And at BPL whenever we can.
Great.
I was born in Los Angeles in a hospital very near where the riots, if you want to call them that, are happening right now. And I grew up in L.A., and I was there in 1964 during the Watts riots. I watched it on television as a young person, as did everyone else in the country. And then I was there again as an adult in 1992 during the Rodney King riots. After that, I became a civilian hearing officer on boards of rights, which is a 3-person disciplinary panel for allegations against members of LAPD. And at the time, 1994, and previously in the Watts riots, the chiefs of police were autocratic, and they served to ratchet up unrest in LA. Chief Parks destroyed the morale in LAPD, and I can speak more about that second era as I was in the midst of it professionally. But today, it's the federal government that is filling the role of escalating unrest and fear, and I feel utterly ill. Just a postscript, if I may. June is the time when the jacaranda trees are blooming all over LA County. Beautiful purple blossoms everywhere. And that's the memory I'm trying to hold on to, and that of my grandparents taking me to the parks in LA.
Karen, we really thank you for your reflection and sharing your history. Thank you very much for your call. 877-301-8970.
Now, I'm reading a couple of our texts who think that this is ridiculous. A local dispute, mostly peaceful. You are out of your mind. And then if the LAPD allows federal agents to be attacked, then what should they do? That's, of course, missing the obvious point that the LAPD thought they were handling this whole situation, and there was no need for federal agents to come in and be attacked.
By the way, the issue is not whether it was mostly peaceful or violent. The issue is it something, one, that can be handled by local and state
police
authorities, and two, does the governor determine whether he or she is a Republican or a Democrat, that it would necessitate the involvement of the National Guard. And none of those situations obtain
But
here.
I think what Newsom is saying and what everybody else is saying now, that the arrival of these
made it worse.
Federal made it worse. They did not make it better. And by the way, there is the distraction theory. I'm going to play some sound from Senator Chris Murphy. He's from Connecticut. He was arguing that Trump's travel ban is a plot to distract the country.
That went into effect last night, I think at midnight.
The travel ban, and also that this whole situation in L.A. is a way to distract people from the GOP mega bill. Here is Chris Murphy.
That's super unpopular. So how do you get that done? You distract people by making them think that they're at war with other Americans, making them think that they have something to fear from people who look different from them or speak a different language. This is what demagogues have done all throughout time, is to divide us from each other, make us feel like we need to be fighting ourselves, while on the side they're stealing from us, either through legislation like we're debating in the Senate today, or old-fashioned thievery, as has also been happening in this administration as well.
877-301-8970.
His point, obviously, that there's going to be this massive transfer of wealth from the poorest to the richest in America if this bill goes through, and that millions of people will lose their health care, and millions of people will lose SNAP benefits. And
I agree with that. But his basic point, with which I disagree, is this whole California thing is just a charade, it's just a cover-up so that people focus on the West Coast rather than Washington. I think it's yet another action that is indicative of how he plans to govern. He plans to use the military if he can get away with it.
I think it's both, because all we're going to be talking about all day long today is what's going on in L.A.
Which I think is perfectly fine.
Well, we're not going to be talking about them debating a bill.
And we've done that ad nauseum. We can do two things at the same time.
This unbelievable statistic I read over the weekend, 30% of Americans don't even know there's a bill that's going to take away their health care.
I don't think that the problem is us in that case. I think the problem is them.
Well, maybe, but I think, again, we have two bifurcated places people get their news, and one is fact-based and one is not.
Deb in Rehoboth, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
I think this whole thing is a stunt to prevent people from rising up on No King's Day, in protest to his big giant birthday party. I think that this is a design to distract and to intimidate people, so that they're not emboldened to stand up to this fascist baloney that he's pulling. But I really think that they're trying to be proactive and intimidate people and stop the protest before they start.
Anticipatory intimidation. That I hadn't thought of it. I think it's a brilliant point. Absolutely. I assume people know there are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of demonstrations across the country on June 14th, the same day there's a military parade in Washington for Trump's birthday.
Right.
That's a great analysis.
Yeah.
I hope you're wrong. You're probably right, Deb, and I think it will probably have that effect. Thank you for that.
Remember John King said
Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Maybe John King was right when he talked about the bridges have not been maintained very well in the nation's capital.
Washington.
He was concerned that too many tanks might plunge the bridges into the Potomac.
Did you see what I don't know if it's the Congressional Budget Office, some credible source said it will take $16 million alone to repair the roads from the weight and impact of the tanks and other things.
Yeah,
Joel in Connecticut texts.
Potholes, Jim. They're going to fix the potholes.
Joel says exactly what the caller just did. This is a dry run. Let's see what happens on the No Kings protests again meeting June 14th. Where do you want to go?
Robert in Lowell, thank you for calling.
Hi, Robert.
Hey, good morning. How are you? I haven't called in a while, but I do try to listen as much as possible.
Good. Thanks.
You.
Anyway, yes. So anyway, like a lot of callers, what's going on in Los Angeles is outrageous. And, of course, what Trump is doing is obviously targeting blue states. And we've seen that in Massachusetts, up here in Lowell. We've seen ICE, and they're picking up kids, and they're picking up, parents, and they're disappearing. And it's a horrible situation, and it's cruel, but I don't know if he's going to get away with it. The other thing that really outraged me last week in his fiasco with Elon Musk, Trump said, just right out loud, he said, well, if he supports Democrats in an election, I'll just terminate his federal contracts.
You know, Robert, I am so...
Not a president speaking. That's a dictator speaking, not a president.
I over the weekend was bemoaning the fact that we hadn't brought that up. I'm so glad you did.
Yeah.
It's exactly the reaction everybody should have. It was not because he says, because I've learned that he's incompetent, can't do the things the federal government has contracted with him. The reason he states is if he supports Democrats, which is a speech issue, I would argue, I'm going to take away his federal contracts. You are exactly right, and I'm really glad you brought it to people's attention. Thank you. 877-301-8970. By the way, we've talked about the June 14th rallies around the country. They're at nokings.org for people who have an interest in such things.
An anonymous texter, Trump offered the National Guard. Nancy Pelosi turned it down. Stop with your liberal propaganda. That is incorrect.
That is incorrect.
As you may recall, it has been testified to by Trump's closest associates during the January 6th hearing that over and over again they went in and pleaded with him. His daughter pleaded with him. Ivanka pleaded with him. The son-in-law pleaded with him. Everybody was pleading with him. His chief of staff was pleading with him to please say something to stop the arguments, to stop the fighting, and he didn't. That's another one of those news sources that you cannot trust that perpetuates that lie. Colby in Somerville, thank you for calling.
Hello, Colby.
Hey, I just wanted to kind of plus one and piggyback on what a previous couple callers ago said about anticipatory intimidation. I was in Boulder, Colorado last week when that horrible attack happened on the peaceful protesters.
Yes.
But the thing that I was upset about more even so than, well, not more so, but in tandem with it is that Kash Patel came out minutes after this attack, called it a terrorist attack. Of course, the police are investigating it. It doesn't appear to have been a terrorist attack or even anything other than one individual. But this is the kind of narrative that I think the administration continues to try to spin, is that anyone who protests peacefully or otherwise is an enemy of the state, and this is what is going to continue to happen. That being said, I do agree with you. I'm going to be at the No Kings protest. I think everybody listening should get out there. Protests are not scary. They're very fun. They're overwhelmingly peaceful, and you can meet a lot of people with really great signs.
Yeah. Well,
Colby,
it's funny you should mention that, Colby. I think Jim told me he went to anti-Vietnam protests to pick up women. Wasn't that why you were there?
That was true. That was a long time ago.
It was an opportunity.
Colby,
that remains valid today.
When you mention intimidate people from just exercising the right to speak, you're calling from Somerville. Ozturk, Ramesh Ozturk is the best example. Marjorie said it about 3,000 times. Her great crime was co-writing an op-ed in the student newspaper at Tufts that was pro-Palestinian. That's the horrible thing she did that caused her to be snatched off the streets of Somerville.
And
Colby, thanks for the call.
As we learned in Project 2025, there's a whole section, Project Esther, which basically wants to make it illegal for you to protest or say anything much that is pro-Palestine, pro what's going on in Gaza. We have Greta Thunberg now, the climate activist who was in that ship that was coming in to try to provide some aid. It was going to be a small amount of aid, but it was going to be some aid to Gaza. They have now been detained.
Commandeered by the Israelis.
Yeah. So, but you're not supposed to say anything about that anymore.
Let's go to Amy in Deerfield, Mass, Western Mass. Hey there. Welcome, Amy.
Hello.
Hi.
I just want to point out that in Los Angeles, we've seen the script before. Anyone over the age of 50 might remember Kent State, which happened in Kent, Ohio on May 4th, 1970. 4 people were murdered that day. 9 were shot total. That was done by our own troops on unarmed young people. And this is really scary and really dangerous. That was the last Republican president, Richard Nixon, to be caught. Not the last one who's engaged in criminal activity, the last one to be caught who had to kind of slide out of the presidency. And so I just want to point out that we've seen this before, and it did end with a tragedy. I am a Kent State grad, and I think that massacre should be taught in schools. That's all I want to say.
May 4th, 1970, and someone who commemorated it brilliantly, Neil Young's song Ohio is
it's a great song.
Just
For
incredible.
Dead in Ohio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is a really important point to make, Amy. Thank you for doing those. May 4th, 1970, I think.
Wow.
877-301-8870. We're talking about the sending of the National Guard into California. And the critical piece here, for people who just tuned in, is that it was not with the approval of the governor. And I'll repeat what I said at the top of this segment. The last time that happened was a mere 60 years ago when John F. Kennedy did it. And he did for, I would argue, a little bit nobler cause. It was to desegregate the schools of Alabama against the wishes of the governor.
He did it in 63, and Johnson did it in 65 for the same thing, for civil rights stuff.
Do you think the average person understands how dangerous use of the National Guard or the military is?
Well, I think the
matters?
caller just highlighted what could happen when you have people that are armed with deadly weapons. Things can go wrong, and that's why Gavin Newsom was saying the police officers in Los Angeles have been trained for this, as the police officers in Boston have been trained for this, to react to these kinds of things. We've had protests here for years. We've had protests at conventions. We've had, protests back and forth during the Trump administration, and he said they could handle it, and I believe him.
Do you remember when the convention was here and Menino scared people, Mayor Menino, about the protests or whatever?
The riot gear.
It was nobody in downtown. Remember, we walked blocks and blocks, and we wouldn't go into the convention hall, and we saw nobody, not a protester.
We saw cops in riot gear, like about 150 of them.
Looking
it was very,
for a
very
riot,
scary. Okay, we're going to keep taking your calls and texts after this quick break. We're talking about what happened in Los Angeles, whether this is a harbinger of things to come in the Trump administration, whether this is a distraction from what else is going on in D.C. You're listening to Boston Public Radio on GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back with your calls at 877-301-8970 after this quick break.
The world takes you outside our borders and connects you with the most important events happening all across this big blue marble.
We introduce you to memorable people whose stories will stick with you. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Carol Hills. Global news and inspiring voices that connect us to people all around the globe.
Join us Fridays on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org. And Dean and Hamilton with Compass Real Estate in Cohasset, a sponsor of the South Shore Art Center's 70th Annual Arts Festival on the Common, June 13th through 15th. Learn more at deanandhamilton.com.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News for the library tomorrow. Coming up in the 12 o'clock hour, Dr. Ashish Jha, who is the COVID coordinator for Joe Biden and is back as Dean of the School of Public Health at Brown University. And former federal judge Nancy Gertner will join us at 12:30 to talk about all that's going on, including a hearing going on as we speak for Judge Shelley Joseph, who had a run-in with ICE authorities and almost lost her judgeship. We'll talk to her about that, too. But right now we're talking about Donald Trump sending the National Guard into L.A. without the approval of the governor of California, or the request, Gavin Newsom. And in fact, Newsom, we played you sound before, said he spoke to Donald Trump for 20 minutes on the phone Friday night, and Trump never even brought up the issue. It's one thing to bring it up and say, Governor, I don't care what you think, I'm doing this anyway, I have the power, which is debatable. We'll ask Judge Gertner about whether or not the president did have this power. Was there a rebellion against the authority of the United States? I don't think so, but we'll ask Judge Gurdon. I want to get your reaction to this. At least speaking for Marjorie and me, we're concerned this is the beginning of his effort to insert the National Guard, the military, into domestic disputes like he wanted to do at Lafayette Square, but was stopped by the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense in his first term.
Yeah, and the Joint Chiefs apologized for his conduct on that day, too. Remember? Yeah. Milley did?
For participating, for that walk over to Lafayette Square, place, whatever it is.
Sam in Providence, thank you for calling.
Hello, Sam.
Good morning. I remember Kent State. I was a kid, and this is getting a little close to that. Kind of nerve-wracking.
It is.
The only difference is, we know they're coming and we have guns. But, the thing I'm...
Wait. What does that mean? Wait. What does that mean? We know they're coming and we have guns.
They're coming in. It's a different world. It's a different world now.
Who's we? Who's we?
Everyone. It's a different... They're walking into... They're different cities than they were. They're not walking onto a college campus in 1970.
Yeah.
It's a different thing.
You mean civilian people are armed? That's what you mean?
Yes. Yeah. Everybody.
Well, I assume this is not a call to arms, but go ahead. Continue, Sam. Go ahead.
No. It's
okay.
Just, that's the world we live in.
Okay.
The thing that's bothering me is that this, after the U.S. attorney called for the people to stop picking on the ICE. Remember, she was upset that ICE agents were getting doxxed, and she was worried about their families.
Yes.
And that seems to me when we started seeing other police forces coming in to protect them. So it seems to me that the National Guard and the Marines, they're going in there to protect these ICE agents, and we know for a fact that a good amount of these ICE agents aren't policemen. They're not. They're Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, J6 terrorists.
I don't know, but I have to say I'm not aware of that. We have had, and Sam, thanks for the call. We have had great concern. We saw this in places like Somerville and Worcester about masks, lack of identification, and a whole host of things like that. And, Gavin Newsom made another good point. One of the things that Trump tried to pivot to, one of my least favorite words, the pivot word, is to say they were there to protect federal property, federal buildings. And Gavin Newsom said something like, more damage is done to federal buildings after our sports teams win championships than they're going to be in the next day or two. And I think that was on point.
No, I think he's just got he doesn't like to see these things. He wanted to shut down all the Black Lives Matter protests. Trump is very upset about those. He doesn't like them unless they're for him, which I think is why he let the January 6th riot go on for quite some time.
There's another piece. He's also he loves the military.
Loves the military.
As we learned on, not only on his birthday, but because
didn't want to join.
He served so admirably. Had it not been for those bone spurs, he could have been.
Somebody just texted, we've had a few calls about the massacre at Kent State, but a couple of texters have pointed out that Richard Nixon nonetheless won on a landslide 2 years later. What did he win? 49 states, everyone except right here in Massachusetts.
I believe that it was.
Then we had the bumper sticker, don't blame me.
Don't blame me.
I'm from Massachusetts.
Want to squeeze another call in?
Yeah, Kevin in the car. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Kevin.
Hey, guys. Great to talk to you guys again.
Thank you.
So I think the most important thing that we can do right now is put our energy into getting people to vote, registered Democratic voters. I think street protests are analog. They don't work anymore. I think they just create opportunities for Trump to promote himself and for the press to sell soap. If you look at the news services, the pictures they have are of people burning their neighbors' cars from their own neighborhoods, and Trump jumps on those opportunities to promote himself. If you talk to Republican voters, a lot of the people that are my friends, even though I don't like Trump, I still keep them as my friends. They see these protests as something that doesn't do anything. That all they see is people ruining their own neighborhoods.
Yeah, but
that's what's going to be seen on Fox News, and everybody's got those algorithms, and that's what they're going to see.
But Kevin, if I may, part of the plays, I'm not with you on this. My attitude is you can do two things at once. You can prepare to exercise your right to vote, and I am of the school. I know some people think I'm being rhetorical when I say this. Trump has completed roughly 1/6 of the 2 years to the midterms. Do you think at this rate we make it to the midterms? I'm not convinced
Jim, we're
we
already, in many ways, an authoritarian country. People are afraid to speak out. We have the First Amendment of the United States and Massachusetts. People are afraid. People are going to be afraid to go to that rally on Saturday because they're going to be afraid of what could happen to them. Certainly, if you're not an American citizen, you're not going to show up, or you're going to be worried about getting deported yourself. Look at, he's cracking down on these law firms. He's cracking down on cancer research for children. I mean, I would say we can't wait till the midterms.
Well, I'm exactly right. But you prepare for that, but you do what you can do in the interim. Kevin, though, we appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much for making that call. And by the way, let's be clear. The situation, at least last night, was not peaceful in Los Angeles, but that doesn't mean that the LAPD and the state cops couldn't handle it. If not, one would argue a governor would ask for help. He didn't ask, and he wasn't asked. And so
he said just the opposite. Don't come. Okay, coming up after this quick break, we're going to talk to Brian McGrory. He was former Boston Globe editor. He's now head of BU's journalism department. We're going to talk with him about his reaction to the Los Angeles situation with the National Guard, how the press is covering Donald Trump, and also George Clooney's Good Night, Good Luck, which is about CBS fighting against McCarthyism. It's a play on Broadway, big hit on Broadway. How that reflects what's going on now. You're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, the award-winning writer Kwame Alexander. His acclaimed children's book, based on a jazz-loving rooster and his barnyard friends, have come home to roost on PBS Kids. Plus, Pulitzer Prize winner Elizabeth Strout joins us to talk about her life as a writer and returning to her much-loved characters in her latest book. That's on The Culture Show tonight at 8 on CAI.
Support for GBH comes from you
and the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, commemorating 250 years of history, independence, and innovation since the American Revolution. Learn more at massachusetts250.org. And Brighton Farmers Market, Wednesday afternoons from 2 to 6:30 on Brighton Common in Boston. June through October, featuring a variety of local foods, farm fresh produce, children's activities, and live music.
Welcome back to BPR, GBH, and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browley. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. And I can't even say this. I'm going to say it for Marjorie. No tickets or RSVP required.
Thank you,
Nobody
Jim.
thinks tickets or RSVP is required.
Well, it's a little joke. Like our Dickie joke.
It is a joke?
Sort of, yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
We're joined now on Zoom by Brian McGrory. He's the former editor of the Boston Globe, currently the head of Boston University's journalism department. Brian, good to see you. Well, that's going well.
Hi,
Let's
Brian.
try that again. Brian, it's good to see you.
Can Brian
Hey
hear
there,
me?
Jim. Hey there, Marjorie.
Hi, Brian.
It's fine. It's fine. Everything's working.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Brian. So we were just talking with our listeners about the National Guard being sent out to Los Angeles over the objections of Gavin Newsom and the mayor of L.A. What did you think about this?
So, look, I think this is another example of the president very effectively being able to choose who his enemies are. And this is a guy who does this is an art form. We're seeing it at Harvard University. We're seeing it with the city of Los Angeles. We're seeing it with the state of California. I mean, name a more perfect enemy for Donald Trump than Los Angeles, California, with Gavin Newsom as the governor, with people in Trump's base still remembering what happened in Portland, Oregon, what happened in the protests after George Floyd. This is an ideal scenario for Trump that he has handpicked and is creating theater from.
The only one I would say would rival it, I was about to say Cambridge, Mass., but you're right. He's already going after Cambridge, Massachusetts, too.
He's going after all of Massachusetts, and Jim, I don't know that we fully appreciate that yet. There's been some coverage on it, particularly in the Globe, but I mean, we are also Trump's ideal enemy, and by attacking Harvard, what Trump is really doing is attacking our entire region up here, and then what he's doing beyond that is attacking the entire notion of expertise, which is something that's anathema to somebody who wants to govern in the way that Trump wants to govern.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So Margaret Sullivan, I'm such a huge fan of Margaret Sullivan.
Too.
She writes basically a critique the press column, and she's always critiquing us in the press for saying we're normalizing Trump and we're not tough enough on him. What do you think in terms of the coverage? Do you think people have been... I noticed 60 Minutes last night. Of course, supposedly 60 Minutes is supposed to lay off Donald Trump so Sherry Redstone can finish her deal and make a lot of money with Paramount, the parent company of CBS. But in their George Clooney segment about his play, they mentioned the lawsuits involving CBS and the Associated Press and stuff, so they weren't laying off him last night. But what do you think of how the press is covering Trump?
Look, 60 Minutes is something, put that aside for a moment, because I think that's an outlier in terms of how the rest of the news media is covering Trump. I'm a big fan of Margaret Sullivan. We all are. She gets a lot of respect, rightly so. Look, covering Donald Trump, covering this administration, covering what's going on in this country right now is really hard and really complicated. And my belief when Trump came into office was that the news media needed to do two things at once. They needed to understand that a near majority of the public voted for Donald Trump, and they also needed to understand that they were probably the final, vanguard holding Trump accountable. And you had to balance these two things. I think the problem is I don't think anybody anticipated all that was going to go on in this short a time. Jim talked before about we're 1/6 of the way through the first 2 years of his administration, and it feels like we've been doing this for years now.
Well, you know what? It strikes me because I've never, I've been on the radio for a long time, and I was on the newspapers before that. It's different now because before it was like policy. Lots of liberals did not like Ronald Reagan because of his trickle down. He was the welfare queen and all that kind of stuff. But this is sort of different to me because you have someone, Donald Trump, no one questions that he's breaking laws all over the place with what he's done, even though he's prevailing sometime with the courts. Mostly he's not prevailing with the courts, or, that he's a felon, that he's done these different things. So it's not about policy. It's about kind of breaking the law and not breaking the law, which I think makes it a different place for the media to come from.
It does. But the problem is, so much of what he's doing is so beyond the pale, so outside of the norm of the way anything's been done before, that if the news media, the Washington press corps, handled it all as a 911 call, they would lose even more credibility. I mean, somehow, again, this is really complicated. You have to put even Trump's outrageous actions into context and be able to discern which is worse than the worst. And that's not an easy task for the Washington press corps to undertake.
Yeah, so where are you in this? Is the responsible part of the press covering Trump the way they should, or is it? I mean, because I don't feel that way, and I'm.
Why? Where do you think it's short, Jim?
Well, I mean, the example is just one example, I admit, but it's the first one that came to mind. I'm sure you saw this was tweeted all over the place. Is the headlines after that lunatic speech?
Oh yeah,
he gave at West Point, where there was the New York Times headline, which was very traditional, very staid, and there was a headline from the Independent.
Trump is looking forward. That's what the Times said.
That said exactly what he was. This is the one where he's talking about his friend who had a trophy wife, and these lunatic kind of ramblings, not to mention disrespectful. And I just don't think the threat of Trump's presidency, the threat to democracy, is coming through. You obviously disagree by the nature of your question.
Let's use your example about the West Point speech. Yeah. It was stupid, it was vapid, and ultimately it was borderline meaningless. It was insulting to the people who were there that day, who graduated from one of the great institutions in this country and in the world, but it didn't carry a lot of meaning. I disagree with you on the New York Times. Your finger will get tired scrolling down the New York Times site before you get to non-Trump news every day.
I know.
They're covering him exhaustively, and they're putting what he's doing into the best context they can. I don't think anybody at the New York Times or the Washington Post or Politico or anywhere else is trying to normalize what he's doing. The problem is it's so abnormal, it's hard to capture.
I think I agree with that. I don't think they're trying to normalize, and it is so abnormal. And so while I can't come up with, I can only give you a feel that I don't get the feel from most stories. I'm not talking about editorials. I'm talking about news coverage about how dangerous so much of this is. I agree, by the way. The West Point speech was not the major moment in his presidency, but they covered it. And if you cover it responsibly, and you don't, in light of the fact much better, well, maybe not better than Marjorie, much better than me.
Well, I never ran anything, Jim.
No, I'm just saying, often the only thing people read is the headline. You read the headline in the New York Times, you think, well, he gave another speech and whatever. And you read The Independent, which says exactly what he was doing.
You had to get at least halfway down the story before Trump said he regretted this whole trophy wife thing. It didn't always work out that well. We all thought, we hope Melania did not get that far in the story, and maybe she doesn't care. I don't know.
Well, can I give you one more example that I may have discussed with you a couple of months ago? I think I'm going to lose you on this one also. Yeah. I am offended by the fact that the President of the United States is a 3 felony guy and was found civilly liable for sexual abuse of E. Jean Carroll, which under Massachusetts law would have equated with rape. That we almost never see that mentioned in a story unless it's a story about his criminal record and about his history of sexually inappropriate behavior.
That's a really good example, Jim. Your West Point one wasn't, but that's a good one.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
The problem here is, again, it gets back to this is complicated. So the public knew that Donald Trump had all of these convictions, had all of these accusations, had all of these civil liabilities against him when they elected him president. So at that point, is it or isn't it? I don't have a good answer for this, but is it or isn't it responsible for the news media to bring this up again and again and again? That was presented to the public. The voters knew what they were voting for or voting against at that time. So I'm not sure how constructive it is to revisit that in every story when the public already evaluated that and decided what they wanted.
Well, I'm not saying every story. I think you make a decent point.
Call him the felonious president in every story?
No, but occasionally it's relevant. If he's talking about the criminal behavior of Abrego Garcia, for example, who's just brought back, as we know, from El Salvador, I think I'd mention that the guy who's saying a guy who's never been charged with a crime, as far as I know, until a couple of days ago, Abrego Garcia, is one thing, and the President of the United States is a 34 or 36-time felon. In any case.
Look, I'm still basking in you saying I've made a, quote, decent point. So, you lost me on the rest.
Well, can I add that one last thing? And I think we all agree he crossed the line. Terry Moran, we mentioned on the show a couple of weeks ago. Moran was the ABC, was, maybe, he's suspended. The ABC news reporter who asked Trump in the White House, speaking of Abrego Garcia, could you get him out of El Salvador? This after the Supreme Court of the United States said that he should the Trump administration, should facilitate his return. He said, yes, I could. Well, Moran, Saturday night, before he pulled it down, posted that Stephen Miller, Marjorie's favorite person in the administration, is a world-class hater. Quote, you can see this just by looking at him because you can see that his hatreds are his spiritual nourishment. He eats his hate. He eats his hate. Wow. He's not an editorialist. He is a news reporter. I assume he had to be suspended, Brian. You used to be a boss. Well, you are a boss, but in a different setting. He had to be suspended, right?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is the bane of every editor, manager in the news media. Somebody on your staff is going to go off on Twitter in ways that you don't want them to. And he did have to be reprimanded, probably suspended for this. I mean, look, Jim, the irony is everything he said was objectively true, right? I mean,
exactly right.
It's so that, and usually the truth is the ultimate defense. in any battle like this. The problem here, as you well know, is in his position, he just can't be saying this stuff. I don't know why he suddenly on a late Saturday night thought he could, but you can't be saying this stuff. I will take that one step further. Ever have anybody in your life, professional or personal, who is so obnoxious and so caustic and so incendiary, provocative, that when you then, in a moment of weakness, come down to their level and act in a way that they do, they will immediately respond with extraordinary umbrage and say, how could you ever behave like that?
Okay.
That's a good one.
That is exactly what happened here.
Okay.
No, don't do this.
Anyone in
Margaret.
particular
Okay,
you have in mind here, Brian? I'm not sure.
We're talking to Brian McGrory. He's head of the BU School
You
of
didn't let him answer, Jim.
No, I know what the answer is. We don't want to go into that. He's head of the BU School of Journalism.
I have one more question about this.
What is it?
So the Vice President, J.D. Vance, thinks that ABC needs to apologize to Stephen Miller. Does ABC need to apologize to Stephen Miller?
No,
Good.
you don't need to
Thank
apologize
you.
to Stephen Miller. You need to take some form of action against Terry Moran and leave it alone,
Okay.
and then move on. Yes.
Good. Okay.
Okay, so Brian McGrory, I hesitate to ask you this question for the following reason. I'm about to ask you about A Good Night and Good Luck, which is obviously the Edward R. Murrow story. It's on Broadway with George Clooney. But then I realized when we were preparing for this segment today, when Marjorie and I asked you a few years ago about one of the greatest PBS GBH series ever, your response was, I hadn't watched Downtown Abbey yet. So have you ever heard of Good Night and Good Luck?
What does it take for you to lose something in your mind?
I lose nothing.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Have you heard of Good Night and Good Luck?
Little different,
Jim, of course I have. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago.
You saw it?
I walked by the theater when it was starting. Quite seriously. So in my mind, I all but saw it.
Okay. You know, it's interesting though. George Clooney was interviewed on CNN. They ran the live show of it, the Broadway show of it on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And he said he thought that the McCarthyism and going after, accusing everyone of being an anti-communist or being pro-communist was small potatoes compared to what we've got now.
Don't you?
I do. I was wondering what Brian thought, because McCarthy was just a senator. Trump obviously is the president, and this is a full court press as opposed to a one-issue obsession.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, especially the full court press part. It's look, McCarthy held the nation by the neck for a while, and it was really unseemly. But what we're seeing now, I mean, we're seeing a circus act now. I mean, every day it's something new, it's something different. There's no one enemy here. Again, I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. Trump is a master of choosing his enemies, and he is choosing a new one every day, including his former friends like Elon Musk. Yeah. And he just keeps going and going with this. So what we're seeing now is more dangerous. It's McCarthyism on steroids is what we're seeing.
You know, speaking of the broadcast, obviously the comparisons people are making between William Paley, who ran CBS News during the time of Murrow, and Sherry Redstone, who was on bended knee to Trump, arguably engaged in negotiations to settle this lawsuit Trump filed suggesting that 60 Minutes inappropriately edited a Kamala Harris interview during the campaign because she doesn't want Trump to block the merger with Skydance, which will make her an even richer woman. It seems to me that if CBS settles, it's even much more damaging than what ABC did over George Stephanopoulos calling what happened in the Eugene Carroll case rape as opposed to what it was technically called sexual abuse, because so many people at CBS News, from Scott Pelley to Owens, who stepped down.
Leslie Stahl has spoken out.
Yeah, it seems to me that if they capitulate on this, it's not quite a death knell issue, but a really, really big deal. Do you subscribe to that notion?
I fully agree with that. I mean, what we're seeing here is almost novelistic. I mean, is there a television show that for generations has been more reliable, more respected than 60 Minutes on any front? I don't, honestly, give me another show the reputation of 60 Minutes. And they have that reputation because they do the work, because they have, they have the talent, they have all of the integrity of the television news can muster. And for this to be on the line now is something almost incomprehensible. And Jim, let's keep in mind, the allegations against 60 Minutes are that they simply did the kind of editing on a political interview that any show would do on any interview. There was nothing even remotely unusual about this. It is simply how television interviews, and for that matter, I'm assuming radio interviews, are often edited unless you play them uncut. And nobody was saying that they would play that interview uncut.
By the way, in a moment of seriousness, ours are never edited for whatever it's worth.
Well, we're live radio.
Well, or if they're even pre-taped, they're not edited. But getting back to that, the issue is not just, as you say, that the editing is the norm. The allegation was the way in which it was edited was to edit out things that would be cast a negative light on Kamala Harris. And when the transcript or whatever it is has been released, it's quite clear that that was not the case. It was very traditional editing, and there were no violations, which is, again, a la the ABC thing with Stephanopoulos, one of the reasons I think that the people who work there are so appalled.
And I mean, what you get into, like, this is vapid stuff. I mean, it's making a huge conspiracy out of a routine edit, making a huge conspiracy out of AP calling the Gulf of Mexico, and then barring them from parts of the White House and somehow winning in an appellate court decision. It's time and again, it's just silly, ridiculous stuff. I mean, I don't even have my head around this whole Biden body double thing in the auto.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but can I get back? People were calling saying that
he's
one
a
of the
robot.
One of the reasons they sent, Trump said, or caller said, sent the troops out to L.A. was an anticipation of June 14th, the No Kings rallies across the country to tamp down that. If you don't have the kind of resources of a CBS or an ABC and their corporate parents, are you not cowed into less bold coverage? You're a smaller television station, a smaller radio station. You have the goods on a Trump or a Bondi or whatever. Aren't you likely to think twice before you go full bore?
Yeah, maybe, unless you're low enough where you're just not in the crosshairs. You're not on anybody's radar screen at all. Just back to 60 Minutes for 1 second in California. I mean, the ultimate comeuppance for Sherry Redstone might be that the board could be held. I mean, there's this movement in California to hold the board accountable for bribery.
Yeah, I love that.
If they pay out too much money to Donald Trump, and Trump is asking for at least $25 million, and this is a case that is trivial at best.
You know, Scott Pelley, who's a CBS correspondent, had that speech he gave at the Wake Forest University, where he said, I love this, journalism is under attack, freedom of speech is under attack, universities are under attack, insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, into our private thoughts, the fear to speak in America. And I think he nailed it. That's what is going on at schools and every place else.
It is 100%, Marjorie, and that is why Massachusetts is in the crosshairs now and might find itself even more so. I mean, again, we are a region here of expertise. It's life sciences, it's higher education, it's financial wealth management. It's all of that, and we rely up here on logic and reason, and again, expertise. And this runs directly counter to how Donald Trump wants to govern, and it's all of one piece.
We're out of time. Next time, if you could tell us if you walk by other great places, West Side Story, Sunset Boulevard, any of those, we'd really appreciate it.
One day I'm going to walk by the library when you're in there, Jim, and I'm going to wave. How's that for walking by a great place?
Oh, Brian, I love you.
We'd be honored. We'd really be honored. Good to see you, Brian McGrory. Be well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
We have been speaking with Brian McGrory, who's head of the journalism department at Boston University. He was the editor for a long time of the Boston Globe. The show continues here in Boston. We say goodbye to you listening to NEPM. Thank you for tuning in. At 3 p.m. on NEPM, the fabulous 413, Monty and Khalees interview Llewellyn Smith on their Nova documentary about algorithms and medicine. You're listening to GBH. We're going to speak to Ashish Jha about public health up next.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. Looking for a little grit to start your week? Then get ready for a Monday night crime spree. Catch Midsummer Murders at 8, Daglish at 9, and Undercover at 10. Tonight on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, ahead on Hour 2 of BPR. We talk with Dr. Ashish Jha, former White House COVID-19 response coordinator and now Dean of Brown University School of Public Health, about the good and depressingly terrible within the so-called Make America Healthy Again movement.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we talk with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner about President Trump's authority to deploy thousands of National Guard troops to Los Angeles to quell the mostly peaceful protesting that had begun there against immigration raids. What recourse do the Gavin Newsoms and Maura Healeys of the world have outside of stern words and open letters? All that, plus our Two More Things segment, next on the second hour of Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. In Los Angeles, there's significant police presence downtown following a third straight day of protests and violent confrontations over federal immigration raids. It's reportedly been fairly quiet this morning, though. Governor Gavin Newsom announced yesterday that California will sue the Trump administration over its decision to deploy the National Guard without the state's consent. That action after 3 days of clashes between protesters and LA police and federal agents. NPR's Adrian Florido has more.
Police on Sunday used tear gas and rubber bullets against protesters. They arrested dozens. LA's police chief said some had hurled chunks of cinder block at officers and fireworks. California Governor Gavin Newsom pleaded with protesters not to give President Trump an excuse to crack down. Over the weekend, Trump invoked a rare presidential authority to take over California's National Guard and deployed 2,000 troops for 60 days. Newsom and LA's mayor, Karen Bass, said the isolated skirmishes did not require that kind of response. They called on Trump to rescind his order. But speaking to reporters on Sunday, Trump said, quote, "We're going to have troops everywhere." Adrian Florido, NPR News, Los Angeles.
As tensions climb over the president's immigration policies, the administration's travel ban is now in effect. The directive, which also includes heightened visa restrictions, affects more than a dozen countries, mainly in the Middle East and Africa. Trump cites national security concerns for the action. Hundreds of scientists at the National Institutes of Health have issued a document they're calling the Bethesda Declaration, criticizing cutbacks at the agency. Here's NPR's Rob Stein.
More than 300 scientists on the NIH's sprawling campus in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C., sent the Bethesda Declaration to NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya, calling for him to protect the agency. The name of the document refers to the Great Barrington Declaration, which Bhattacharya helped write during the pandemic before he was at the NIH, questioning lockdowns and other public health measures during the pandemic. The Trump administration has cut hundreds of NIH staff and slashed billions in NIH funding. Rob Stein, NPR News.
In the Pacific, Tropical Storm Barbara has strengthened into a hurricane. The storm is about 155 miles southwest of Manzanillo, Mexico, with top sustained winds of 75 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center in Miami says swells will affect portions of the coast over the next few days. U.S. stocks mixed this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 28 points at 42,730. The Nasdaq is up 67 points, and the S&P is up 7. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A judge on the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court has tossed out a number of cases in the MBTA Communities Act. The Communities Act requires 177 cities and towns served by the MBTA to create at least one zoning district where multifamily housing is allowed by right. However, 9 towns, Duxbury, Hamilton, Hanson, Holden, Marshfield, Middleton, Wenham, Weston, and Wrentham, all filed lawsuits earlier this year after the State Division of Local Mandates determined the law was an unfunded mandate. In his Friday decision, Judge Mark Gildea wrote that he disagreed that any of the towns had demonstrated, among other things, any direct costs associated with following the law, and all 9 cases were dismissed. And with 2025 halfway over, the city of Worcester has had 0 homicides so far this year. Telegram and Gazette reports that compared to this time in 2024, the city had 7 recorded homicides. Police Chief Paul Saucier says the numerous methods the city has had at its disposal to combat gun violence, along with Worcester Police Department outreach programs, are very likely contributing to that huge drop in homicides. In sports, Red Sox host Tampa Bay at Fenway tonight. Cloudy, low 60s today, scattered showers and 50s overnight, and then it looks like rain for most of the day tomorrow. High near 70 degrees, sunny and mid-80s on Wednesday. We'll take it. Right now, 61 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with CNN's John King. Amari Paris Jeffries ahead of their Embrace celebration. The mayor's going to be with us June 17th from 1 to 2, and the governor will be with us June 25th from 11 to noon. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. We're now joined in Studio 3 live by Dr. Ashish Jha, Dean of Brown University School of Public Health, former COVID-19 response coordinator for President Biden. Dr. Jha, it's great to see you as always.
Thanks for having me back.
Pleasure.
Well, let's start with big picture. How is public health doing in the first few months of the Trump presidency?
Yeah. It's a concerning moment for public health in a couple of ways. First, public health relies on science and evidence and data to make our recommendations, and the scientific enterprise has been sort of almost feels like public enemy number 1 for this administration. They've been going after NIH, they're going after universities. So that worries me for the long run. In the short run, we've seen, things like the measles outbreak. We have a health secretary who doesn't seem to believe in modern science and modern medicine, doesn't think that it's serving us well. Now, modern medicine has problems, but the way he has gone about trying to deal with it has been a huge problem. So I'm very worried about this moment, and we've got to turn this around.
How about public health leaders? We had Lee Pelton in here the other day, who former president of Emerson. He's now obviously the head of the Boston Foundation. And he used the word cowardice to describe university presidents who have been hiding under their desk. The hiding under the desk are my words, but cowardice was his. How are leaders in the public health community responding or not to RFK Jr. and Trump?
There are people in the community who are speaking up, and I think that's important. I think there are too many people who think if you just stay quiet and that this is a storm that will pass. I keep telling people this is not a rainy day, folks. This is climate change. You got to deal with this very differently. There's no hiding under the covers and hoping it all goes away.
Before we get into some of the specific issues, I looked up this morning, you'll correct me if the number's wrong. AI told me that 20% of your student body at the School of Public Health are international students.
Yeah,
is that right?
That is
What's
right.
going on that front?
Yeah, we don't know. Like we have always been a very international school. I think that's a good thing, by the way. It's a good thing for America, not just good for our universities. And we don't know what's going to happen, whether they're going to be able to get visas, whether they're going to be able to come. So we're going to pay, obviously, very close attention.
What do you say? What do you instruct your staff to say when a kid from We had 2 Harvard students on with us 2 Fridays ago. One from Pakistan, the co-director of the student body, co-president of the student body. One, a sophomore from Sweden. If a kid from Sweden or a kid from Pakistan is applying or thinking of applying, what do you tell your staff to say to him or her when they say, I'm really nervous about coming to America, I'm really nervous about coming to Rhode Island?
Well, first of all, what I say is, look, we obviously are not in control of what the immigration officials are going to do, and so there is an uncertainty around getting a visa. That wasn't an issue a year ago. A kid from Sweden who wanted to come study here, we were sure they were going to get a visa. At this point, I'm less sure. So I think being very honest and open about that is really important. But I think also saying that once you're here, you're going to be part of a very vibrant community that's going to, welcome you with open arms, and you'll be a great member of our community. I think trying to balance that message, but being very open and forthright about this is
Would
important.
you come to the Brown School of Public Health if you were that kid in Sweden?
I would try. I mean, look, I'd try to get the visa. I think America, let's talk about why we think this is good for America, first of all, because people are like, well, why do we even have international students? Not only do they enrich the education of American students who are also there, give them a global perspective on how the world works, a lot of those students then end up staying, they start businesses, they start companies, and that is what we want. That's the history of this country, and that is one of the things that has made this country great. And we want more of that, not less.
We're talking to Ashish Jha. He is Dean of Brown University's School of Public Health. You know, you wrote a great piece in the Globe about the biomedical world being at risk. So tell people what that means if they're not sure. And you also mentioned personal cancer treatment. I just talked to a friend a few days ago who had a personalized breast cancer regimen, which was going to for her unique kind of cancer, which is fairly new stuff. So what is the biomedical world, and what's the risk here that we're facing?
Yeah, so look, the future, the next 20, 30 years of our country, of the world, is going to be defined, in my mind, by bioengineering, biomedicine. Biology is in this critical moment of just really taking off. It will have huge effects on economy, health, and our national security. America and China are in a race right now on this, and the heart of America's biomedical enterprise is right here in Massachusetts, Kendall Square, MIT, Harvard, BU, Brown, others. And by taking the kind of approach the administration is doing and dismantling it, the impact will be that a lot of those scientists will leave. I think in that article I wrote for the Globe, I was reminded of a quote from this German scientist, a German physicist, who won the Nobel Prize. Every university in Germany was trying to get him back. And a German newspaper said, well, why won't you come back to Germany? And he said, look, if I go back to Germany, great place, great universities, up and down the hall, I will have the best students of Germany. At MIT, I have the best students of the world. And that is what makes America great. That is what has allowed our scientific enterprise to flourish. And that is what is at risk, because we're both gutting the scientific enterprise and we're making it hard for the best and brightest around the world to come here. This is like the most sort of ridiculous self-goal. I don't understand what the administration is thinking.
And you also talked in that piece about how every dollar that is spent on NIH doubles in economic restaurants, housing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and look, in several ways. I mean, first of all, there's a huge short-term benefit, right, of those dollars flowing in. But the economic impact of the businesses, of the companies, of the health gains, people live longer, they work longer, and pay more taxes. The data on this is overwhelming. When you invest in science like NIH, the country is wealthier for it. So the cutting of NIH is really an attempt to make America poor, and it will have that effect in the long run.
Can we talk about the fixing, assuming that day comes? There's certain, for example, budgetary things that Trump or one of his people, Republicans in Congress, might do that you argue, if we make it to the midterms, if we make it to another presidential election, and someone who actually believes in government, the best of government is elected, he or she can fix that, restore the funding. How long-lasting is this kind of damage? It seems to me if China captures the research and the researchers, it's not like they're going to have a clock that they're watching. The second John Doe is elected a Democrat in 3.5 years, I'm coming back to the United States. That's going to be really hard to fix, isn't it?
It is, and let me explain a couple of reasons. You've mentioned some of it already, Jim. I mean, when you dismantle something like what we have built in the United States around our biomedicine and scientific enterprise. It'll take a generation to put it all back together. Once people disperse, you're not going to be able to like ring a bell and people from around the world will come back. Like that's not how people have lives. You have kids, people have spouses. They're going to set up research shops elsewhere, so they're not going to immediately come back. Then you have a whole generation of kids who are looking at this going, this feels super unstable.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just go work on Wall Street, which feels, at least compared to this, maybe a lot more stable for them. I don't know. Like, Wall Street's fine. I want more kids, certainly the best and brightest, going into medicine, public health, science. That's what we're going to lose.
Are you seeing that? I hadn't even thought of that. Are you seeing some reluctance in kids who otherwise would be?
I'm even seeing it among my own students who are looking at graduation, thinking about, well, I would have worked in a public health department, but public health departments are getting gutted. But, McKinsey's still hiring and BCG is still hiring and they feel a lot more stable. And what am I going to tell them?
Do you really hear that? You really hear that?
I do. And what am I supposed to say?
Why would you not think that?
It's just so upsetting. But I'm sorry.
No, and my view is when they come to me and say, I feel like I've had a passion for public health, and yet I'm like, no, you got to do what you got to do. You got to get a job in public health departments. They are not hiring. They're laying off their staff. Labs are not hiring. They're laying off their staff. So I'm very sympathetic to these kids, these young people. They're not kids. They're young adults. But at the same time, I think, what does it mean for our country, for our state, our cities, when this is happening? This is not good.
RFK Jr., as everybody has said, a lot of his ideas about the horrible food we eat and the obesity problem and sugars, cereals and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it would be great if we fixed up those kinds of things, especially in school lunches. Yeah. But some of the other things, and you wrote about this too, getting rid of the bird flu vaccine, and then the crazy idea about no COVID shots for pregnant women. So how's he doing?
Well, look, when I worked in Washington, when decisions were made about who's eligible for what should we do, first of all, those decisions were largely made by the scientists at the CDC, at the FDA. The health secretary didn't wake up and make those decisions. I'm a public health guy, but I was working in the White House. I didn't make those decisions. They were made by the scientists, and then I helped implement them and make sure that people got what they needed. RFK seems to be making a lot of decisions bypassing the scientific enterprise of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
That is problem number one. On the issue of pregnant women and vaccines, like the data on this is overwhelmingly clear. And look, don't listen to me. Listen to the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. That went ballistic when these guys came out. When RFK and his folks just came out and said, we're not going to make, women eligible anymore. They said, we're not going to recommend it. What that functionally means is they're not going to get their insurance to cover it. Pregnant women are not going to get COVID vaccines. That is bad. And my view is you should leave it up to them as a choice. Make the recommendation so the insurance company covers it, and then let the woman have a conversation with her obstetrician and make a decision. Don't take that choice away from her. That strikes me as super problematic. But can I take a minute to talk about bird flu vaccine?
Oh, yes.
Because look, RFK's done a lot of things that have gotten a lot of us aggravated. This is the biggest problem in my mind, the biggest mistake he has made so far. Let me explain why. Grab anybody in public health. The pandemic we've all been worried about for decades is bird flu. Because if it ever becomes a pandemic, and I hope it doesn't, it's going to have a very high mortality rate. When I was inside the Biden administration, we looked at the way the virus was evolving, and we said, we have a problem here. The virus is getting better and better at infecting mammals, and it's not that far a jump to eventually starting to infect humans more regularly. We've got to build vaccines against this thing. And the Biden administration put out a contract to get Moderna to build the vaccine platform so that if this ever becomes a problem, we'll have vaccines ready to go. It's kind of like, imagine somebody 2 years before COVID showed up said, hey, COVID's going to show up. What would you have done? You would have built vaccines. You would have built up testing. And what RFK did was showed up, came into office and said, we're just not going to do this. Now, hopefully there will never be a bird flu pandemic. But if there is, we are going to be in serious trouble. And we just gave away our best tool to fight against it.
What was it, $600 million grant? Was that what it was?
I know one quick thing about this.
I want to stay on this too for a second.
Moderna, of course, was the COVID vaccine that a lot of us took. If some other country like China does develop a bird flu vaccine or does develop whatever vaccine may be for a future pandemic, we in the United States, we got the COVID vaccines first because we did develop it here. Yeah. I worry about that too, that we may be not first on the list, but maybe 10th on the list or 20th on the list.
Yeah, and it depends a little bit on who develops it first, right? If it's our European friends, then maybe we'll get there relatively early. If it's China, I'm not sure when we'll get there.
Yeah.
But why are we turning over our fate and our future when we have what I think is the best scientific enterprise in the world? Why are we turning it over to the other countries?
I should know the answer to at least one of these two questions. Let me start with the one I should know the answer to. What's with the RFK Jr. mRNA? What's that about?
So, look, in the pandemic, a whole bunch of people decided that they don't like mRNA for some reason. And I've spent a lot of time reading up on this and trying to understand their logic. I have to tell you, Jim, I have struggled to understand the logic. mRNA is in almost every cell in our body. mRNA is a platform that we have used for 20 years to try to get treatments and vaccines going. And people say, well, it's untested. And I remind them, probably 1 billion people, that's 1,000 million people, got an mRNA vaccine during the pandemic, somewhere around 800 million to 1 billion people. There is almost nothing we have given to more people in the world. If there were some terrible outcome, you would know it by now. These are exceedingly safe. Yes, there's a problem with myocarditis in young men if they get 2 shots very closely spaced together. Other than that, it is a very, very safe platform.
There was a terrible outcome. COVID was a terrible outcome, particularly for those who didn't take the vaccine. The second thing I wanted to broach, I know this is just hypothetical. If Moderna wasn't based in Cambridge, but was based in South Carolina, would the $600 million have been withdrawn?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, if you look at the universities that they're going after, they're all in blue states with only blue senators and blue congresspeople, right? Congressmen and women. So that certainly is true. I mean, I think there is a particular dislike of mRNA that maybe even crosses their kind of, is it in a blue state or a red state? I don't understand it, but it certainly isn't helpful that Moderna is in Massachusetts.
Do responsible public health leaders like you collectively even try to reach out to RFK Jr. and his team to give your thoughts and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So I spend a lot of time in Washington.
I know you do.
And I talk to anybody. I talk to lots of people in the Trump administration. What's interesting to me is I've lots of conversations with people in the Trump White House, in other parts of the Trump administration. The problem is that the Trump coalition is made up of both traditional Republicans and in HHS, RFK people. RFK people are not traditional Republicans, right? RFK was never a Republican. And what they have done at HHS is kick out all the traditional Republicans. And so most of the folks that I know pretty well, who are Republicans, with whom I might disagree on policy, but I think are good people, reasonable people, rational people, there are only a small number of them still left at HHS. They are fighting the good fight. I talk to them when I as much as I can be helpful, but they are in a difficult situation.
Staying on vaccines for a second, the most painful stories that Marjorie mentioned pregnant mothers a couple of minutes ago. We read another story. I read it almost every day. A pregnant mother and her best friend in a group, whatever they're in, a Facebook group or whatever, stop talking to each other over the vaccine thing. And it's clear there's a direct link you can make between the skepticism bred by the RFK Juniors of the world, not just him in all fairness, but the generic RFK Jr. has trickled down into that. I think we talked about this last time you were here. There's really almost no amount of public education, considering there are 2 Americas, to quote someone we generally don't quote, John Edwards. I mean, we don't. I mean, but it was a good line, and it's totally true. He was and is. There's almost no amount of education that's going to win those people back to safety for their children. Is there or is there?
No, I'm more optimistic than that. My view is that there are many Americas, that our information ecosystem has become very fragmented. Even looking at any news, like the LA riots that are happening right now, you have one group of people who only see visual images of violence and another group see only visual images of peaceful protests. We don't have a common understanding. That is the problem that you're outlining. For me, the solution is you got to get into the communities. You got to talk to public health leaders in those communities. You got to talk to civil society leaders, religious leaders. And those are the people who are going to have to do the communication. I don't think some pithy tweet on Twitter is going to win the day. What is going to win the day is getting out into the community and talking to people.
Is that happening?
A lot of us are trying to do that. Trying to engage with community leaders around the country and particularly outside of our own communities. I spent a lot of time at the public health school at Brown trying to teach our students that we're not just training them to go work in blue states. They got to work in purple and red states. It's a generational effort. It is not something we're going to solve overnight.
One of the things I would think, though, that would be moving to, people with a good heart is if you don't vaccinate your kid for measles and your kid is in a class with an immunocompromised child who for health reasons can't get the vaccine, like a kid that may be dealing with leukemia.
Yeah.
You could really harm that child. I mean, so you're going to risk doing terrible harm. Even, I don't know, could you die if you have? Yeah, that's who wants to do that?
Yeah,
but risk a little 6-year-old's life because they don't want to get a vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is right that the information that people are being fed is that measles is no big deal, that it's safe. And they always sort of bring up, well, kids lived before we had the measles vaccine. Actually, kids died in very large numbers before we had vaccines. But I do think appealing not just to, yes, your kid may be healthy, but the kid in school may have leukemia. You may not know about it. That's the sort of, not just you have a personal responsibility, but you have a responsibility to your community members, to your friends and family. I think that is an important part of the messaging because it's true.
Can I just have a stat enter this conversation? 78% of the 2,066, you know this actually, Dr. Jha, I didn't.
Yeah.
Of the 2,066 U.S. counties with complete data show a decrease in kindergartners who received 2 rounds of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. That is really frightening.
You know what I also wanted to ask you about? RFK Jr. said a terrible thing about families with autism. It was horrible. They're never going to hold a job and obviously there's a great deal of variance. Yep. You can be a really reasonably highly functioning person, and you can be profoundly autistic. But he's claiming he's going to solve this whole thing by September, which I think is not probably going to happen. I mean, I wonder if that's going to take any of the wind out of his sails or what.
Well, look, first of all, there's a very large number of scientists who have been working on autism. I know many of them for 20 years. And including trying to understand its underlying causes, trying to understand how we do a better job of diagnosis, how we treat kids better. So the idea that somehow the health secretary can just decree that we're going to have an answer by September is absurd. Look, they're going to come up with something. They will declare victory, because they always do. His most ardent supporters will be like, see, we told you that he was going to figure this out. Unfortunately, that kind of stuff doesn't help the kids with autism. It doesn't actually help them live better, healthier lives. So, we sometimes forget in Washington all the gamesmanship that goes on, that they're real human beings, in this case, real children, whose lives are going to be affected, and we are not taking that seriously. We're doing these ridiculous pronouncements like we're going to figure out a cause and have a solution by September. No, we're not.
Can we go back to your last job for 2 seconds? We haven't seen you since Jake Tapper's book came out about your former boss, Joe Biden, suggesting there were a lot of insiders that were aware of his alleged cognitive decline, they say, and it was covered up. What was your experience there?
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about this. Look, I was in the White House from March of 22 through June of 23. So I left about a year and a half before the end of the administration. I interacted with the president, certainly in 22 when things were much worse with COVID, quite regularly.
What's quite regularly?
I personally saw him, once a week.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
In the early days. Later, less, just because things were different and he was busy on other things, and COVID wasn't as much of an issue. Look, I've said this before, and I will say, my interactions with him, almost always in the middle of the day. I'd see him as part of my work day. I found him super engaged. He had really good questions for me. So I understand that people talk about cover up. First of all, I left by the summer of 23. I'm not going to speculate on what has happened with him since then. But my engagement interactions with him were all really positive and really good. So I again, There's a lot of speculation about what was happening with him. It's not what I saw, and that's all I can.
You think we're ever going to get? I'm assuming people read the story about Obama's doctor is questioning that Biden's doctor didn't order cognitive tests, and we have talked a lot on the show through the years how there should be mandatory cognitive and medical testing, and there should be agreement between the parties what should be released, erring on the side of transparency. We're never going to get to that, are we, with the kind of partisanship we have?
I would like to. I mean, I think that would be a really good thing, and I think presidents owe that to the American people. I really do. I mean, my one experience with his health issue was when he got COVID. I was in the White House the first time he got COVID, and I was pretty involved in talking to the press, talking to him. I felt like transparency was really, really important. Look, yes, people generally have privacy rights when there are health issues, but not when you're the president of the United States. And you have an obligation and a responsibility, and I think every president should abide by that.
Before you leave, we are a really hope-deprived show. I want to be clear. I mean, we have to be honest about ourselves, Doctor.
Things are pretty miserable here.
Bring me back more often. I will keep the hope going.
We've known you for a long before your Biden days, your Harvard days, whatever. Are you relatively hopeful about coming out of this in terms of the piece of the world where you have greatest expertise? And do you really feel it, or if you are hopeful, or you just believe that's the way you got to present?
No. Look, I'm not saying that's just the way I got to present. Let me tell you where I really am on this. First of all, I don't think we should underestimate how bad the destruction of our infrastructure is. I have been actually quite vocal that we needed to reform the NIH, we needed to reform the way we do science, we need to reform our universities. But this is not reform. This is sort of wholesale destruction. And that's happening at the national level. It's happening at individual universities. It is bad, and there is no short-term recovery. What I am hopeful for is that if we make the case to the American people that this is not about university budgets or NIH budgets, this is about their health and well-being, and that if we do that kind of at a national level, but we also get out in the communities and do that, people will, over time, come to see this, and there will be pushback. And we will begin to repair this. But as I said, this is not a rainy day that we got to just get through. This is climate change.
Would you like to host the show for a few weeks and have one of us step aside? I think it would be much appreciated by our audience. Dr. Jha, it's always a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very, very much for coming in. And thank you for your great pieces in the Globe. They've been wonderful reading.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Dr. Ashish Jha, who's Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health. Thanks again for coming in. Coming up after a quick break, it's time for another edition of On the Docket with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. We're going to get her legal analysis on the situation of the National Guard in California, plus the criminal case pending against the wrongfully deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who, as you know, is back in the United States now facing charges. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's no secret that it's hard to find water in the desert.
The math problem is all the water's been used. It's been called for. But yet we have one of the fastest growing communities in the western United States.
One community in Utah is hoping to solve that problem with sewage. I'm Ari Shapiro. That story and more on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Cape Playhouse in Dennis Village. Now playing The Buddy Holly Story. Up next, Rent, the musical that changed Broadway. Tickets at capeplayhouse.com. And Burton's Grill and Bar, featuring a scratch kitchen where each dish is customizable for those with food allergies or restrictions. A gluten-free menu is also available. Details on their allergy protocols at burtonsgrill.com.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. For the latest iteration of On the Docket, we're joined now via Zoom by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, good to see you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Judge Gertner, as always, for joining us. So I understand you were at the hearing today about Newton Judge Shelley Richmond Joseph, and she was accused of helping this guy get out a side door when he was in front of her facing deportation charges and some other charges back in 2018. So do you have any news for us? Do you have breaking news, Judge Gertner?
Well, I feel like putting a microphone to my mouth and going,
right.
breaking news. And, my next career after judge and commentator will be reporter.
Exactly.
I thought it was very interesting. I don't know whether people understood. This is sort of the moment when when the full story is told. And there were openings by both sides. The opening from it's essentially the person who's prosecuting the case for the Justice Commission, the Judicial Commission, rather. Person who's prosecuting the case, woman by the name of Judy Fabricant, was telling the story that is a familiar story, which is that the defense lawyer in the case who represented the person who was undocumented and who really clearly cooked up the scheme. It was he who did it, and he wanted to do it for his client. And the bottom line is that she was urging the hearing officer to accept the defense lawyer's version of the story. So that was one piece. And the second piece was she shut off the tape recorder. What was interesting about the opening from the representatives of Shelley Joseph, a woman named Elizabeth Mulvey, was that, first of all, it was more complicated than that. One was everyone shuts off the machine. Everyone does it. Oh. And also, it wasn't clear that Joseph, who had only been on the bench for 6 months, even knew that there was such a rule. Two, she talked about the DA in the case who went out in front of the Newton courthouse and told the ICE agent that the man would be coming out the front, which begins to cast doubt on the theory that the escape through the rear of the Newton courthouse was cooked up in an off-the-record conversation, in which the defense lawyer, the district attorney, and the court officer and Judge Joseph participated. And then she went on about something which anyone who does criminal defense work knows, which is the person who is suspected of having cooked up this scheme was the defense lawyer, Mr. Jelinek. And he got a deal from the government, from the U.S. Attorney's Office, to cooperate so that there would not be federal charges brought against him. And they mentioned that there were 3 versions of his story. And it was only in the last version that he said Judge Joseph knew all about it. So the hearing officer is going to have to step back and say, do I believe this defense lawyer who is a cooperating witness against a judge? Do I believe that somehow the DA was also in on this by diverting the ICE's attention? There was one other piece that before the guy went out the back, that Judge Joseph called the trial court chief to ask what she should do about ICE. This is hardly consistent with someone whose purpose was to evade the ICE official. So I thought it was interesting.
Can I just for a little piece of background, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is Judge Joseph was taken off the bench for a period of time. Then she's restored. She's on the bench now, I believe. And is the issue before this hearing purely the disciplinary issue? Yes, is that right?
Right. She was taken off the bench for a period of time. And then when the criminal charges were dropped,
right. Okay.
He was restored. But then when these are disciplinary charges against a judge, essentially for inappropriate conduct, for lack of candor, because they didn't. There were issues about what the interviews she was conducting had been conducted with the trial court, and that was one of them. And now she's on administrative duties. But, step back a little bit. The kinds of the judicial misconduct that gets to this stage of public hearing are, is the sexual misconduct, money issues. That it has escalated to this point says something, it seems to me, back in the Trump one, about the extent to which state authorities want to placate.
Yeah.
Well, except that the vast majority of this happened not during Trump's first administration, right? Isn't this most of it during Biden?
The charges were dropped during Biden, but the question is whether the court, particularly the person who's bringing these charges, who was supervising it, wants to show their independence of political pressure. And what they're doing then is subjecting this judge, who was only on the bench, by the way, for 6 months at this time. So whatever she did, my goodness, does that deserve essentially, these kinds of proceedings?
Talking to another judge, Nancy Gertner. I'm sorry.
So Judge Gertner, we've talked a lot today about the president sending the National Guard troops, and Pete Hegseth, head of the Pentagon, talking about maybe going with the Marines as well from Camp Pendleton because of unrest in Los Angeles over ICE raids. The governor and the mayor out there in California did not want the National Guard or the federal troops. So what do you think?
Do you have enough time? I want the rest of the hour. I want the rest of the time here. What do I think? I mean, first of all, the disturbance was minor and under control.
Right.
Totally under control. Second, the provision that Trump is citing to is a provision, as everyone has read about, was used when Lyndon Johnson sent in troops to enforce a federal desegregation order. And that was against the will of the governor of the state. The troops were sent in during the Rodney King disturbances, which were widespread, and that was at the request of the governor. So this is not at the request of the governor, A. This is not a widespread disturbance. And Bill Kristol on his blog today sort of deconstructed the language of the order. And the language of the order would seem to give Trump the authority to do this anywhere in the United States at any time, regardless of the wishes of the state authorities. So this is in part about Los Angeles, but is mostly about an extraordinary usurpation of power. That's what it's about.
We're talking to Nancy Gertner. I don't know if there's much to discuss in this one. I just wanted to get it out of my system, only because I'm 99% of my political predictions are wrong. I actually did predict that when the Trump administration finally brought Abrego Garcia back to the United States, they'd find something to charge him with criminally to justify, in their minds, what they did to begin with. He's charged with smuggling people. My favorite part of this, and I use the term favorite advisedly, since rules and laws don't apply to this administration, the Attorney General of the United States has said that he smuggled minors, which is not in the indictment, that he had involvement in murders, which is not in the indictment, that he was involved in the abuse of women, which is not in the indictment. So we have an indictment. I'm not saying it's minor. He was indicted, I think, by a grand jury, but he was indicted for this smuggling offense. But the Attorney General feels it's appropriate to stand up in front of the media and, quote, charge him, in essence, for all these horrible crimes, which he is not charged with. Is that, I mean, does it get any...
Is that normal? No. No, I mean, but there are Department of Justice rules that are concerned, commenting about a pending criminal case. So that's one thing. By the way, there's a lot to be said about Abrego Garcia. One is, for the past couple of weeks, nearly, almost 2 months, the administration has been saying that they can't get him back.
Yeah.
The extraordinary whoops defense, right? We put him on a plane. Sorry. We put Jim Browdy on a plane. Now he's in El Salvador. Whoops. And of course, there was...
Imagine that.
And on this, there was an oops, right? Remember when Bukele said oops?
Yeah.
So one thing is, we've talked about this before, it's unimaginable that Trump could not call up Bukele and get the man back.
Wait. He said the one time they departed from "we can't do it," he said to Terry Moran, now the suspended ABC News reporter, in that interview a few weeks ago, "Could you bring him back?" He said, "quote, I could."
I don't want to.
He acknowledged it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, but the other side of the coin is there also has to have been a contract. The contract said you can't bring women, and the first plane load had women, and they sent him back. So there clearly was a mechanism to do that. Now, this is very interesting to say there are these criminal charges. Let me put them in one box. And the issue is there were no formal extradition proceedings, which is what you do when there's a charge in the United States and you're asking a foreign country to bring the person there. There has to be a proceeding in the United States. It has to go through the senior most official. It's usually like the Attorney General of the state, a country from which you're taking the person. None of that happened here, which makes it clear this was an indictment for the press and a phone call from Trump. Period. Full stop. And this indictment, by the way, I'm looking for my notes on this. The indictment talked about, that he lied to the authorities when he was picked up in 2022. Ryan Goodman, who does really very careful analysis of all sorts of things, discovered that in fact the police report had the complete accurate statement of where he was coming from and what he was doing. So who knows how they got an indictment, but that's not difficult. But this is, do you know the concept of a cover charge?
No.
Not in a restaurant, but in fact, Jim would probably know this. Sometimes people who did police abuse, the civil rights cases would say that if the police beat you up, oftentimes you would be charged with something, and people began to call that as a cover charge. This is a cover charge. It is a charge in order to cover up what their behavior was, and unfortunately, Mr. Abrego Garcia is caught in the headwinds.
But I'm hoping that Mr. Abrego Garcia is going to get great legal representation in his case. I'm hoping, and that we'll find out exactly what he did or didn't do. I hope.
I think that's right. I mean, the charges are very serious, but what's significant is that in 2022, when he was picked up, there was an investigation. I don't know how substantial it was, and they let him go. So this has all the earmarks of a contrivance and what in the law we call a vindictive prosecution, which is a prosecution not because you actually did something that ought to be prosecuted, but in order for political purposes or some other inappropriate purposes. Again, if he did all of this, it would be one thing, but I am suspicious of a 3-year-old charge.
Yeah.
And I'm suspicious about the way he was returned. And certainly the U.S. Attorney has no right to be talking about this the way they are.
We're talking to former Judge Nancy Gardner.
So, some people, I'm not really sure who those people are, but have kind of made fun of Big Balls, that's the online moniker of the Doge guy that went to Northeastern for a while. He's
19 years old.
Yeah, he might be 20 by now. We've been talking about him for so long. But I was really distressed when the Supreme Court decided that while the appeals court considers whether they violated the law at Doge, Big Balls and his other friends there could get anybody that is a Trump enemy or anybody that they didn't like in high school. They could get their medical records. They could get their mental health breakdown records. If somebody had an abortion, all your financial records. I mean, essentially this is what the Supreme Court is allowing while this case goes through the courts.
Wait, that's not all they're allowing. While they're allowing the Doge people to get access to all that data, they're not allowing the public through a Freedom of Information request to get information about Doge.
Yeah.
So it's a double whammy.
I mean, how can that be kosher?
Kosher, I don't know about, but I mean, it's hard to know the answer because this case is on the emergency docket. So it is a case that is not argued and as to which there were no full briefing. So, and what a scholar named Steve Vladeck has written is that the emergency docket is actually where the court has been bending over backwards for Trump.
Yeah.
These are short-term orders saying you can keep what you have while the case is being litigated. There was a dissent by Judge Jackson which said, you understand that you are now creating different rules for the government because this is hardly an emergency. Usually these are emergency orders. You have to show irreparable harm. How is it irreparable harm for them to return that which they shouldn't have gotten to begin with? How is that irreparable harm? The republic is not going to fall if the information is returned to the people where it was originally. So I don't know what to say about this. I don't know what it predicts about the outcome of it, but it's certainly troubling.
So speaking of troubling, you wrote a piece that is troubling.
May I just ask one thing, though? It seemed and I'm not a lawyer, but common sense that when all the sensitive information, emergency or no emergency, the default should be, while this case winds its way through, we're going to protect the intimate details of millions of Americans' lives. I mean,
you would absolutely think so. You would absolutely think so. As I said, that's why it's not just sort of the technical, no irreparable harm here.
Yeah,
irreparable harm is all in the other direction. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, I think that the best explanation is that to preserve their neutrality, Trump has to win some and lose some. And they may well be picking the wrong things for him to win. Let me just go back 1 second to L.A. for a moment.
Sure.
I'm waiting for someone has to say this. And, I mean, I have 5,000 op-eds sloshing around in my head. He says cops should not be, immigration officers shouldn't be spat upon and shouldn't be harassed. January 6th.
Exactly.
Where were you with that?
Yeah.
Can I just say yo?
Yeah, no, the hypocrisy is, they were in favor of President Trump on January 6th as opposed to annoying him over the weekend in Los Angeles. I guess that's the only answer.
Okay, so I want to read a first paragraph of a piece you wrote with a couple of colleagues. Even you, being Nancy Gardner, even though President Donald Trump has lost every case brought by law firms suing over his executive orders against them, he likely has achieved a primary objective, inflicting injury and intimidating major law firms so they'll be less likely to challenge his executive actions. That's really depressing. Could you flesh that out a little bit?
Well, it's like everything else that he has done here, which is there have been almost 90% of the cases have succeeded in court. Mm-hmm. But succeeding in court doesn't necessarily accomplish everything. If clients are walking away from, like the law firm cases are overwhelmingly in favor of the law firms and against the Trump administration. But if clients are voting with their feet and going to the firms that have not capitulated, that would be troubling. Now, I actually think that the firms are going in both directions. Companies are going in both directions, to the firms that have not capitulated and those that have. But the problem is the chaos that he's created, have people walking with their feet. It's the same thing with the orders to, fire large swaths of the civil service. And those orders have largely been overturned, at least preliminarily. But who would want to work for the government? You wind up with people saying, I don't know what will happen tomorrow. I've never seen, government job was what you could always count on. So there's a chilling effect, as we say, no matter what the issues actually are.
I'm glad you brought this because we only have a minute left. I'm a strong believer that in almost every area, I'm sure there's an exception I'm not thinking about. We're just talking about public health and how it would take at least a generation to build back what he's destroyed with Dr. Jha a couple of minutes ago. International students, even if he loses the litigation, at least he's lost preliminarily some of those. The kids sitting in some other country, is he or she or are they likely to consider the United States when this is hanging their head? And I think in almost all these cases, he loses, but he still wins because of the chilling effect that's left behind. I mean,
well, I mean, yes and no.
What's the no?
The yes part is consider what would have happened if the courts had gone the other way.
I agree, of course.
Yeah. I mean, there is a statement, and someone else has written the article that I wanted to write, which someone has actually gone through the cases in which Trump has lost, and the language is stunning. The language is stunning. It's not just you lose. This is an absurd argument. Yeah. The Republic can't possibly accept these kinds of arguments. So there is a thunderous rejection on, and yes, we'll have to rebuild. But at least there's that thunderous rejection.
It's good to see you, Judge Gertner. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for being with us, Judge Gertner.
Take care.
You too. We have been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a Boston Public Radio contributor. Okay, up next, just enough time in the hour for our Two More Things segment. You do not want to miss Jim's investigative report.
This is a big mistake.
From
it's not an investigative
Canton, the scene
I really regret this
of the crime.
already.
You're listening to BPR at 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local news.
Boston city officials are offering their annual summer safety guidance.
GBH News.
Officials are warning drivers to expect significant, potentially hours-long delays.
Here for what matters to you.
Governor Maura Healey says healthcare cuts approved by the U.S. House would have a devastating impact on the Commonwealth if they pass the Senate and are signed into law.
GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Revision Energy, a solar company and a Mitsubishi Electric heating and air conditioning contractor, offering customers the option to combine a solar array with a heat pump system to manage their heating and cooling at home. RevisionEnergy.com. And American Repertory Theater, with the hit musical rom-com Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. The Boston Globe calls it clever, funny, and delightfully surprising. Now playing. amrep.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery Egan, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. It's time for two more things, and as always, not always, but mostly, Margery, go ahead.
Jim, you go first, because not every time, you are from Cambridge, and usually you're above these kind of tawdry tales of murder and heavy drinking, alleged murder and heavy drinking and blizzards. You go ahead.
So I made a big mistake this morning at our staff meeting. I was going to do something on the Tony Awards, which were really spectacular last night, and then I unfortunately made the mistake of saying my daughter and I went on an errand to Canton this weekend.
You claim it was an errand to Canton.
And I'd been to Canton before. I haven't been there since, obviously, the horrible death of John O'Keefe. But I was persuaded, in the spirit of full disclosure, I had to admit that I did what I often criticize others in doing. I took a macabre curiosity tour.
Yeah.
I first stopped at the Waterfall Bar and Grill,
the bar,
which was the last stop before the deaths. Terrific little bar, by the way.
Great little bar.
I looked for the high top where they had sat. I heard in the testimony. And by the way, we've heard that Karen Reed had 9 drinks.
Yes.
I ordered a margarita.
Uh-huh.
It was like the size of a gallon container. So, I mean, they are big drinks out there.
They are big drinks. Okay.
Then, and I can't believe I'm admitting this one, we drove by 34 Fairview, which is of the alleged crime. The only not embarrassing part of that is we were not the only people driving down Fairview. And you might say there were people who were living there. They weren't. They were going so slowly when they got to 34 Fairview. And not only were they going slowly, when they got to the end of the street, they made a U-turn so they could go back. And check it a second time. My point in this, and I was forced to do this in the spirit of transparency, I don't have much of a point, except to say that the behavior I often criticize in others, Margery,
that's right.
I occasionally am guilty of myself. Now, can I say
you criticize that people like me, the tabloid girls who have covered all these little tawdry matters, but I think you're on a roll. Right. I mean, last week you were down in Provincetown at the sex shop. Toys of Eros, run by Jordan Hudson's mother. You were
she's one of the runners.
She's one of the runners there. You went to the sex shop in the duty of investigative reporting, and you went to a bar and had a margarita and drove past the scene of the crime. I mean, you're turning
nachos
into
too. The nachos were incredible. Can I say one positive thing?
You're turning into like Mike Wallace Jr.
In a related, more positive note, the woman from whom we get almost all of our Karen Reed trial information, Sue O'Connell, won a New England Emmy Saturday night for commentary. And I would say there's nobody in the business who deserved it more. So congratulations to Sue. I'm congratulating her, 1, because I want to congratulate her, and 2, so I can change the subject. Okay?
Jim is going back tonight for round 2.
I'm not going back. I was in Canton to drop off my daughter's car.
Yeah, that's your story.
Okay, what are you talking about?
So I just want to say, Jim and I were lucky enough to co-host the celebration for Keith Lockhart's 30th
after
anniversary.
The concert.
Yes, but before that, we went to the concert. I've gone to the Christmas Pops a million times, which are fantastic. But I haven't gone in the last couple of years to see the regular Pops. We just don't realize what a treasure you have in the Boston.
Treasure.
They are so talented. These musicians are so talented. Keith is like a genius. They're going from playing Chip Corea to Broadway,
Chick
Corea, whatever his name is.
Chick Corea from Chelsea, by the way.
Yeah, from Chelsea, that's right. They did a little Patriotic America the Beautiful. They show films to come down to accompany the visuals to go with that. You can go there for a little extra money. You can sit up in the regular seats, or you can pay a little extra money and sit at a table and have some champagne, or Jim could have a margarita. I think they don't serve margaritas. A Planter's Punch, whatever they serve there.
You had the Planter's Punch.
Pops Punch.
You missed the whole point. It's not about the drinks. Keith Lockhart has been there 30 years. Talk about treasure.
Yeah.
By the way,
it's just a fantastic night. You cannot believe how wonderful.
They're brilliant.
And you are so sorry when it's over. So I just want to give a shout out to the talent and of the Boston Pops.
Can I do a shout out?
Keith Lockhart. What?
About this thing?
Yeah.
I had a seltzer. Marjorie had 2 drinks. So that's...
No, that's not...
That actually is true.
I got the non-alcoholic punch, and you said, why don't you order the rum punch? And
Which
then
you did.
And then you drank my rum punch. That's what happened.
But congratulations to Keith for 30 incredible years.
And if you haven't,
and to the Pops.
And if you haven't gone to the Pops for a while,
brilliant.
You don't know what you're missing right here.
And the symphony is also brilliant.
Yes.
What treasures.
Okay. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, we all grow up in America learning that if you work hard, you put in some sweat equity, you'll get ahead. Well, journalist Adam Chandler argues in his new book, 99% Perspiration, that the American dream is sort of a joke. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The American dream ain't what it used to be. That's next on Boston Public Radio.
GBH is committed to lifelong learning, and the Beacon Circle shares that commitment with gifts of $2,400 or more. It's one big way to help keep our community informed and connected. Learn more at gbh.org/Beacon Circle.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Making History, 200 Years of American Art. Hopper, Cassatt, O'Keeffe, and more come to PEM on June 14th. You can learn more at PEM.org. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, offering local, long-distance, office, and piano moving, with 23 locations throughout New England and across the country. More information at gentlegiant.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of BPR. Journalist Adam Chandler argues in his new book, 99% Perspiration, that this idea that if you work hard, you'll get ahead in America is complete bunk. That the pesky American dream has turned out to be more of an American fantasy. Adam joins to discuss what really breeds success in 2025 and how to achieve it.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then some afternoon Trump relief, courtesy of an elephant in Thailand that barged into a convenience store to steal some snacks. When the state of the world gets too depressing, what is your go-to late-night sweet treat or salty treat? Or, Jim, a tube of liverwurst squeezing right out of the tube. Late-night snacks and you, next in the third hour of BPR, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. There's a heavy police presence in downtown Los Angeles a day after President Trump called in the National Guard to confront crowds who took to the streets this weekend to protest the president's immigration crackdown. NPR's Steve Futterman has the latest.
Many streets were completely cordoned off. Police were in complete control. Some areas were even cordoned off to the media, even with a press pass, which is quite unusual. Most streets have been reopened, although there's a very clear police presence. There's one key street that's shut down. That's Alameda Street. And that's where much of the violence, the confrontational protests have taken place, especially last night. But most of LA pretty much back to normal this morning with some very clear police presence.
That's NPR's Steve Futterman reporting. California Governor Gavin Newsom says the state did not ask for the National Guard's deployment, accused President Trump of intentionally stoking unrest, and now he says the state plans to sue. On the grounds of the White House, reporters asked Trump if border czar Tom Homan should arrest Governor Newsom. Trump said that he would. He also had remarks about the protesters.
People that are causing the problem are professional agitators, they're insurrectionists.
Critics accused Trump of unlawfully calling in the National Guard to face the protesters, but failing to do so when many of his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Citizens from a dozen nations are now facing a full travel ban from the U.S. Tighter restrictions are also imposed on travelers from 7 additional countries. NPR's Luke Garrett has more.
President Trump's ban centers mainly on citizens from African and Middle Eastern countries. The White House says these nations harbor terrorists, fail to cooperate with visa security, and don't ID travelers well enough. They include Afghanistan, Myanmar, Haiti, Iran, Sudan, and Yemen, among 6 other countries. Visa applications from these citizens will now be rejected unless they meet a narrow set of exceptions. But according to the Associated Press, the Trump order does not roll back already issued visas to citizens of these now banned nations. 7 other countries will have restricted entry to the United States. This is the first travel ban Trump has ordered during his second term. During his first, Trump ordered 3 other travel bans against predominantly Muslim nations with varying success in the courts. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
Amazon says it plans to spend $20 billion on 2 data center complexes in Pennsylvania. The Associated Press reports the sites are designed to meet growing demand for artificial intelligence products. One of the complexes is due to be built adjacent to a nuclear power plant that came under federal scrutiny over an arrangement to essentially plug into the power plant. U.S. stocks trading higher this hour. The Dow is up 46 points at 42,809. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. 5 years after she was charged with several federal crimes, a Massachusetts judge finally gets to make her case today. Former Newton District Court Judge Shelley Joseph will appear in judicial conduct hearing today over allegations that she willfully helped a man wanted by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, in evading federal authorities. A court-assigned hearing officer will report on the courthouse scene of the alleged crime, which ultimately led to the judicial complaint against Joseph. At issue is whether she violated the rules of conduct for jurists. A former student at Assumption University could face at least 7 years behind bars after admitting on Friday to trying to extort $3 million in a hacking scheme that involved foreign servers and an unnamed co-conspirator. 19-year-old Matthew Lane of Sterling, Mass. declined to comment Friday as he left the U.S. District Court in Worcester with his parents after pleading guilty to 4 hacking-related charges, including cyber extortion and identity theft. According to a plea agreement referenced in court, Lane faces at least 2 and likely many more years in prison. Prosecutors say they will appeal any sentence that's lighter than 94 months. And the Karen Reed trial is also underway again today. Red Sox host the Tampa Bay Rays at Fenway tonight. Cloudy, low 60s today. Scattered showers overnight, low in the 50s. Then showers likely tomorrow, high near 70. Wednesday, though, sunny and 80. Gotta love it. 62 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Subaru and its retailers, partnering with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society this June to give blankets and messages of hope to patients facing cancer. Learn more at Subaru.com/care.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, and we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. The mayor, Michelle Wu, will be with us on January 17th. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there. Before we introduce our guest, we discussed this National Guard thing in L.A. With our listeners, then with former federal judge Nancy Gertner, with the former editor of The Globe, Brian McGrory. CNN is now reporting, we missed the press availability because it was live during our show. Trump was asked when he got back to the White House whether the border czar, that's Tom Homan, the tough guy, should arrest Governor Newsom, or Governor Newscum, as the childish Donald Trump called him. And Trump says, I would, meaning I would
arrest
him. It's great.
That's good.
In any case, central to the American dream is our bootstraps belief in the ability to put in hard hours, get the job done, and get ahead, either through upward mobility or just by achieving some semblance of economic security. But as journalist Adam Chandler writes in his new book, 99% Perspiration, that so-called American dream is basically out of reach for most. He says it all comes down to the way we work, and, we can't avoid this connection. It may have contributed to the rise of Donald Trump, Adam is a former staff writer at The Atlantic. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. You get the picture. He joins us now. Congratulations. Good to see you again, Adam. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, I am so thrilled to talk to you, and your timing could not be any better, because what you're talking about in your book is what I hear, especially from people in their 20s and 30s all the time that are just really struggling. So give us your thesis.
Well, the idea behind the book is that we've been told all of our lives in culture and policy and all these different ways that if you work hard, you're going to get where you're going. You're going to be successful and you're going to make it. And if you don't get there, it's because you didn't try hard enough. It's this impossible logic to success in American life. And it's frustrated a lot of us. It's cost us a lot in terms of our social cohesion and our lives. And it makes work central to our lives in ways that community and families and friends really should be. And so I kind of dug into the myth of all of that and saw, where did it come from? What are the reasons why we believe this in a way that other countries don't have the same attitude about work and their jobs and professions as part of their identity?
Is Ben Franklin partly responsible for the greatly admired Ben Franklin responsible there, Adam?
Absolutely. Ben Franklin is kind of the first person to introduce this idea of the secular version of the Protestant work ethic. He was all about working hard and getting ahead, but he had a lot of advantages. He came up in a time where, first of all, slavery was still legal, so the economy wasn't fair to begin with at the time, and he was somebody who benefited from a lot of breaks. He had mentors, he had people helping him out, and not everyone has access to those kinds of support systems that he did.
Tell us the story about the bald eagle, which I know a lot about Franklin thanks to Ken Burns and reading and whatever, but I never heard this one. What's the bald eagle story?
I love the bald eagle story. Well, so they announced the bald eagle is the national symbol and the national bird of the United States. And in a letter to his daughter, Ben Franklin writes that he wishes it wasn't the eagle because bald eagles are kind of lazy. They steal the prey of other birds who work really hard to get fed, and they swoop in at the last minute and take what someone else has done to feed their own. And he says instead the turkey should be the national bird, which is a really funny idea and a really funny thought, but his argument is that the turkey is someone who is protective of his land and is a native bird to North America and really represents the American spirit better. So I always love that story, too.
We're talking to Adam Chandler. The book is 99% Perspiration, A New Working History of the American Way of Life. I wondered, Adam, if you ever thought there was a time where this worked better, assuming you were white, because if you were black or you were Latino or something, there was obviously huge racism. But if maybe the period after World War II, there was some exception to this, that the American dream was, we had more social mobility, I guess. Or am I incorrect?
No, you're absolutely correct. If you look at the post-war boom, that's what an era that a lot of people are most nostalgic for when they talk about the good old days of American opportunity. And some of that was because of union density. We had high union membership, and there were opportunities for people to make sure that their bosses didn't make 50 or 60 or 70 times more than they did.
Yeah.
Hundreds times more if you look at some companies. You also had kind of this false promise of post-war America where all of America's competitors, a lot of them at least, they were kind of in shambles after World War II. The economies of Europe were smashed by the war. So we have this false idea of the 50s and the post-war boom as being this American greatness that was kind of artificial because we really had a 20-year head start on a lot of the other economies out there. So it's complicated.
You know, Adam Chandler, this may be too much of a leap, but you're the guy to ask since you wrote the damn thing. My takeaway from your book is there's sort of a little bowling alone, kind of the great Bob Putnam book in this. Well, I know you know what I'm talking about. There is, right?
Yes.
And explain why.
Well, so if we're looking at how work has become so central to our identity and striving to be successful, as it gets harder and harder to succeed, we isolate ourselves. We isolate ourselves because we're working later hours, or we isolate ourselves because we're not as successful as we want to be. And there's a lot of shame in that in American life. If you don't make it here, you're meant to feel like it's a character flaw of yours. It's not because the economy wasn't good. It wasn't because there were difficulties in sort of career paths that were interrupted by recessions or bad policies or bad trade deals. It was because you didn't try hard enough. And so that kind of leads to an alienation. And we're seeing this kind of play out in our politics and in our culture, just not having the opportunities and the time that we need to be there for our friends and family in our community, because work has kind of replaced this as a way to show that we're valued and that we have identity outside of ourselves. And yeah, it's a big part of the question right now.
Well, also, I think because even if you are reasonably successful and you're doing reasonably well, everything has become so expensive that everything is out of reach. You know,
what's the stat in your book? A third of Americans with full-time jobs can't afford basic necessities.
Yeah.
And that's before the so-called big, beautiful bill, right?
That's right.
Obviously.
That's absolutely right. You know, the stats will blow your mind. I mean, Americans are so much more productive, 64% more productive than they were in the 70s, and they're making 17% more than they were in 1979, only 17% more. The economy's more than doubled in size, and people are falling behind. They're falling into debt. We're seeing it all over the place, and no one is immune to it.
You know, we talk a lot about how if you try to, shorten the work week in Paris by half an hour, everybody goes crazy and they're taking to the streets and yelling and screaming. We talked last week.
Lengthen the work week by half hour.
Lengthen by a half hour, yeah. But there is going to be demonstrations this Saturday across the country about the Trump administration. But it seems to me that we're kind of passive in general, that we take a lot. I mean, other countries, obviously, they have better health care. They have a better safety net. They have better, they don't die as young as we do, all these things. So do you think people don't know it, or are we uniquely uninterested in our plight?
It's a really good question. I mean, we put so much cultural emphasis on self-reliance here and on individual greatness that it really takes a lot to kind of see through all of the ways that is kind of programmed into our systems, into our culture and our schools, and the way that our politics operates. It's all about getting it done by yourself and not ever needing help, not ever relying on people around you. And that's a lonely and difficult way to live versus other countries where people who are struggling together tend to band together. And this is something that unions help create, but it's also something that communities help create when you look at the challenges that people are facing regarding things like healthcare or like time off or like paid leave, paid sick leave. All these things that we lack are sort of a distraction because we are so focused on making the best of it regardless. That's sort of our ethos.
You know, you mentioned unions in the community, and one of the things unions and communities do is they lobby governments to do good things for people. And my only issue with your book, where I really take issue, is I think you say something like, I'm not suggesting we become France. I am suggesting we become France. Adam Chandler, you tick off some things that we've done whole segments on the show. The right to disconnect, meaning that an employer can't force you to, in fact, I can't even ask you if I think it's the state of the law, off hours to check your email, to respond to an email, that sort of thing. 35-hour work week. How long have we had the 40-hour work week? 90 years in this country. It's probably time to do something there. The lunch break thing, which I didn't even know about. You want you to describe that in a minute. But essentially, government has intervened and made sure, for whatever reason, I don't know where the pressure points were, that people have better lives than we do. I mean, that's a fair statement, right?
Absolutely. We defer to businesses.
Yeah.
To set the corporate culture sort of sets the tone, as opposed to what workers want or what workers need, which is why even if you have all of these vacation days, and people are lucky to have them, most people don't take them.
I know.
A majority of people do not take all their vacation days. And if you have unlimited time off, you take even fewer, because it doesn't feel like it's yours to take. You don't feel empowered to do the things that you need for yourselves. People often sort of rely on their off hours to do the basic errands of their lives, or get their doctor's appointments, or do whatever it is that they need to do, and they have no free time or leisure as a result of that. And that's just not part of other cultures. They see that burnout that you have from working too much, or from not having enough time away, as something that detracts from your ability to remain creative and engaged in your work. There are really fascinating studies in other countries where they look at how that correlates from having enough time off, enough benefits or basic sort of perks that make it so that you feel empowered to take time away, and how that shows that people ultimately stay at their jobs longer and make essentially more money for companies because they treat their workers better.
Well, one of the ways...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
It's just not in our vocabulary to look at giving workers and people the benefits that would make them more creative and more engaged. American businesses lose over $1 trillion a year to attrition. These are people leaving jobs that they can't afford to stay at, or they're tired, or they're burnt out, or they just can't work under the conditions that they're facing anymore. That's money that could be made by businesses if they treated their workers and invested in their workers more, or if government forced their hand a little bit to do so.
We've said 1,000 times on this show that if you go into the business community in 2019 and said, how about creating a hybrid work environment for your employees, they would have said it'd be the end of Western civilization as we know it. COVID comes along, they're forced to do it, and look at the outcome. One of the things I mentioned in that little litany from your book of things government has done in France to make life better for the worker is the lunch deal. Could you share some stats in this country and tell us what France has done, which, by the way, may sound trivial to some of you. In my view, it ain't trivial in the slightest. Tell us about it.
Well, if you zoom out and look at the average French person's life, they have an hour more of sleep every single day. They have an hour more of leisure every single day, and they live 5 years longer than the average American does. They may not get the, Jeff Bezos kind of wealth that someone else, it's hard to accrue that kind of insane amount of money, but you're trading a lot for this idea that if you just keep grinding it out, it's going to work out for you. But the reality is that it costs more in terms of our social cohesion, in terms of our happiness, in terms of the time that we have with ourselves and with our friends and with our families to work this hard. And so that's one aspect of it. And so this is actually something that they stumbled on kind of by accident. During the Industrial Revolution and tuberculosis, they instituted an hour-long lunch break in France, where they would air out the factories and offices so that people would be safer at work. And they realized that by giving people that time off, an hour, maybe 2 hours in some cases, people were more productive. They socialized. They were better performing at their jobs. And they realized this is a good thing for us. This is a social good that we should make part of our labor code. And they did. And it's been the case ever since that you have at least an hour. Now, there are some exceptions to this. It's not a perfect law, just like 35-hour work week in France isn't a perfect law. But you set these cultural guidelines and people come to expect, I'm going to have some time during my day to catch up with a friend, catch up with a coworker, run some errands. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to feel good about the end of my day and being free of everything, and having the opportunity to really unplug and relax. that makes a huge difference in quality of life issues that a lot of Americans feel burnt out by.
And what percentage of us in America eat lunch at our desks? 60%? Is that the number?
The most recent number is around 60%. And it's wild to think about it because just imagine, this American experience. I was traveling in France while I was reporting this book, and I went to Normandy. I went to the World War II sites.
Oh gosh!
And we were given a 15-minute break for lunch. We were a little bit behind, and everyone was a little bit kind of rushed. And they said to the group, "We only have 15 minutes to eat. I hope that's okay." And Americans were like, "No problem." We had some other people from Germany and from Italy. They were shocked. They're like, "How are we supposed to get lunch done in 15 minutes? That's insane." And I was like,
story.
honestly, make it 10 minutes, make it 5. I don't care. I could do it.
We're talking to Adam Chandler. The book is 99% Perspiration, A New Working History of the American Way of Life. By the way, tell people where the 99% perspiration line came from.
Oh, sure. It's the famous Thomas Edison quote, genius is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration.
Yeah.
And, it kind of sums up the ethos of American life. Thomas Edison is this genius, tinkerer, founder type, and he's held up as this character that everyone should emulate. And his whole idea is just keep working hard and you'll get there. And that's not really the case.
You also talk about the so-called ragged, by design safety net, and that our government programs are purposely gummed up. In this piece you wrote, you talk about people waiting for a decision from the Social Security Administration. Tell people about that.
What's alarming about this is that our government and our social services are kludgy by design. They make it difficult for you to get your benefits. They make it difficult when you are on public assistance programs. You constantly have to do all of this paperwork that makes it not worth it. And when it comes down to Social Security, 10,000 people die every single year waiting for a Social Security disability claim to be adjudicated or solved or sort of sorted out after a refusal or dismissal, an initial appeal. And that's a huge number. Another 8,000 people go bankrupt in that time. So we're talking about tens of thousands of Americans every single year who are waiting for the benefits that they pay into the system to receive. And because of the understaffing and the things that DOJ is trying to do to make it even more difficult to get your benefits, it's all by design to make people decide this isn't worth it. It isn't worth it for me to get all of these benefits that I'm entitled to by my taxes. To get me through a rough spell, to get me through a difficult period, to help me out when, I lose my job or I need extra assistance or I become the sole caregiver, whatever the case is. And we don't have those same kinds of difficult sort of obstacles for wealthier people who receive tax cuts, who get all kinds of wild benefits that we don't think of as handouts. And it's an important distinction to make because we really do give billions of dollars every single year to wealthier people without really batting an eye. And it's easy to do.
Adam, one of the things we've discussed, Marjorie and I have been on the air 26 years, give or take a month or two. One of our most frequent topics through the years is national service. And we've discussed it with a lot of guests. Almost every guest who's ever been in this room or a studio who supports it on a voluntary basis. My position is if it's voluntary, you're going to capture the people who wouldn't benefit from national service and miss the people who would. And it seems to me that the call for national service should be even greater now when we are as divided and don't know people or associate with people who are not like us. You talk a little bit about it. Fill in why you think that would matter and where you fall on the mandatory versus voluntary with incentives kind of spectrum.
Sure. Well, I speak with General Stanley McChrystal in the book, who is one of the most decorated members of the military before he retired. And he talks about social cohesion that he witnessed while in the military. And that's something that we absolutely need in our culture right now, because we are so disconnected, because we are so fragmented. We're not just politically sort of gerrymandered out of encountering people that we disagree with. We're also economically divided. We live in enclaves that are less sort of cohesive and less sort of I guess, normalized than they used to be. When decades ago, people used to live in neighborhoods where a dock worker and a doctor would live on the same street, and their kids would go to the same school, and there would be that kind of interchange. We're past that now. And so I actually think it should be mandatory. And I'm going to say it because we're at a breaking point in our social lives where we absolutely need to understand what each other's problems are and what each other, we need to restore the common good and the common faith. And those are the kinds of things that aren't going to happen voluntarily at this point. We really should be pushing for this to become
like after high school or something, right? Post high school.
Yeah.
Pre-job, pre-college, pre-whatever, right?
Exactly. It could be a cultural norm that we set, but it's the kind of thing that could do a lot, not just for high school graduates or young people. It could connect younger people and older people, rural and urban, rich and poor. This is the kind of thing that you send people out to do all these programs and learn from each other and give to each other. And we all benefit and we all trust in each other again, because we don't have a lot of mutual trust anymore. There is this real heavy sense of suspicion, and it's clouding everything that we do in our lives. But I spent, months traveling around the country writing this book and talking to people in Alabama, and I went to Plymouth, I went to California, I went to liberal places and rural places. And if you get past a few basic conversations with people, you have, beyond the point where you know what political party a person belongs to, we have very similar beliefs about opportunity and what a good life means and what it represents. And it's just there are a lot of obstacles that are artificially imposed on us. But when you have a really good conversation with someone, it really makes you feel differently about this country.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so before you go here, we know that you are an expert on fast food.
That's why we met him. We met him with this book.
Yeah, Drive
book.
Through Dreams, all about the fast food kingdom. And we're going to talk with our listeners in just a few minutes about their favorite late night snack. And I know you're on the History Channel a lot about the food that built America. So do you have any favorite late night snacks you'd like to tell us about, or any suggestions, or any good ones or bad ones?
Well, my good one is a bad one, and it's Taco Bell.
That's great before you go to sleep.
I got the special joy of watching the Yankees lose to the Red Sox this weekend, and I got to go to a Taco Bell afterwards. It was like the perfect night for me because I hate the Yankees and I love Taco Bell, and it all worked out. And sometimes the universe just smiles on you in that way. You just have to go with it. So I am a Nachos Bel Grande guy at Taco Bell. It never lets me down. And I understand that some people find that polarizing, but sometimes you just got to go with it.
You know how to live, my friend. Adam Chandler, 99% Perspiration. The book is great. A New Working History of the American Way of Life. Congratulations. It's great to see you, Adam.
Ditto. Congratulations. Like I said, this is incredibly timely. So thank you very much for your book and for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with journalist and author Adam Chandler. His latest book, again, 99% Perspiration, A New Working History of the American Way of Life. But I'm sure you'll find it if you just Google 99% Perspiration if you're driving and can't write that down. Adam Chandler, the author. Okay, coming up after this quick break, as I just said, we're going to talk about our late night snack habits. Are you spiraling in front of the fridge at 1 o'clock in the morning like that elephant who was
in Thailand? That's right, I forgot.
Went raiding that convenience store in Thailand, hitting its head on the ceiling as it was grabbing Rice Krispies treats. Okay, are you upset about these news cycles, or just upset in general? You're just an anxious eater or whatever. If you are, tell us what you go for at 1 o'clock. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, as anti-ICE protests play out in Los Angeles, a demonstration is scheduled for Boston later today. A Newton judge accused of helping an undocumented immigrant evade arrest during President Trump's first term is facing an inquiry. And a growing desert community in Utah that needs more water is taking a fresh look at sewage. It's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And Gloucester Stage, presenting The Glass Menagerie. A son confronts the ghosts of his family's past in Tennessee Williams' iconic drama. Now through June 28th. Tickets available at gloucesterstage.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News with the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. I should just do a shout out, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished a pasta dish that I made last night.
That's right.
And the reason I'm bringing it up beyond the fact you said one of the best smells
so
ever.
Good.
Whose recipe it is?
You told me, Christopher
Kimball.
Yeah. My daughter and son-in-law said they've never had a bad recipe out of his books.
It's fabulous. They're great recipes. Okay, we're ending the show here with...
well, hold on. One thing before we get there. We were previously talking, we did 2 more things, and Jim was talking about how he spent his weekend cruising through Canton looking for the scene of the crime. Where,
I had an errand to do.
And going back to the bar where there was some heavy drinking going on.
Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Was the weekend before that he was down looking at sex toys.
No, it was not. It was in Provincetown for the holiday, and I stopped by Toys. I was not looking for sex toys.
That's his story.
Jesus
down there
God.
in Provincetown looking for sex toys. So anyway, the anonymous texter says, I only know Jim during the week. His weekends sound pretty wild with all the sex toys and margaritas.
Okay, I didn't buy any sex toys. I went in the sex toy store.
Okay.
I was looking for Jordan Hudson's mother. She wasn't there.
She wasn't
and I did have a margarita.
Okay.
The Waterfall.
Let's
and by
move
the way,
on.
it was a fabulous
Fabulous
great
place.
little bar.
Fabulous place. That's
Canton.
right. That's
okay,
right. Canton.
so here's the deal. I, for one, identify with the Thai elephant that I'm assuming you've seen the video of. It's gone viral, wandering into a grocery store and chowing down on snack food. The elephant is apparently well known in that part of Thailand, causing some people to draw connections between the meandering, one-track-minded large creature trying to satiate its hunger in Thailand and a certain public radio host here in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And no, to any future caller or texter wondering, the elephant and I have never been seen in the same room at the same time. Okay, Jim, move on. We do want to open the text lines, ask you about your late-night snacking habits. And by the way, I hadn't thought of this till just now. Have they changed because of the stressful world in which we all operate, meaning were they one kind of thing before and now are they different because of the news cycle? Are you finding yourself spiraling out of control with the snacks? It's sort of like rubbernecking an accident or overhearing some good gossip. You just can't help reaching for more popcorn or liverwurst or whatever it is. Lines are open at 877-301-8970. Light night snacks and you. What snack foods are getting you through the fall of the American empire? What do you grab at 1 a.m. or 11 p.m., staring blankly at the freezer or pantry, hoping to scratch that unscratchable itch? Now, I have no idea what you do for a late night snack. I'm guessing it's something insanely healthy like Greek yogurt with fruit in it.
No.
Oh, no, it's peanut butter.
It's peanut butter.
Peanut butter.
You're right.
And by the way, you're not alone. Guess who? I didn't even think of this.
Oh, well, play the sound.
Here's a clip of Springsteen on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert in 2021 talking about his favorite sandwich.
Bruce, what is the best sandwich?
That's easy. 3 a.m., peanut butter and jelly, big glass of milk.
So that's a classic.
So there you go. You're and Bruce Springsteen.
It is a classic. Well, I don't usually do the peanut butter and jelly.
You just do peanut butter on a spoon.
No, I do. Well, I can do that too. I can do peanut butter in any form, but mostly I like peanut butter and smashed banana.
Oh, I do that.
On nice, really good bread, and you have to have the glass of milk to go with it. So but in a squeeze, I'll go with the jelly too if I don't have any bananas.
You know, one of the great regrets I have, because I obviously I'm a big snacker.
Yeah.
If I had a trunk like that elephant, I mean everything.
You could just suck it right in like a vacuum cleaner.
Now, since I'm going to preempt Marjorie because she's going to do this at some point to ridicule me and my mother, my late mother.
Yep,
it is true that my mother, I can't explain this, so don't call and ask me to explain it. Don't text. Every night before I went to bed, this is really, it's like she wanted to kill me, don't you think? Every night before I went to bed, I'd have a Hebrew National salami sandwich, whole salami sandwich, with an extra slice of salami on top. I don't mean like if I went to bed at 9 o'clock, I'd have it at 6:30. I meant if I went to bed at 9 o'clock, I'd have it at 8:45. and then I'd lay down after having had a thickly cut Hebrew National salami sandwich, which I really don't understand. Now, can I tell you, I did some research for this. Here are the healthy, I don't know if anybody cares about healthy stuff at a time of stress. A string cheese with low fat, whatever it's called. Here's a good one. Nuts. And you know why nuts are really good? I didn't know this.
Well, it's walnuts specifically they're talking about here because they contain magnesium and melatonin, which helps you to sleep. You know what's a good one that I wouldn't have expected to see? Popcorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, except if you put too much butter on it, which I do. But popcorn, that's a pretty good late night snack. But that's not those aren't the popular ones, Jim. The most popular, according to this, what is this called? The Food Tasting America or something like that, are kettle chips. Kettle chips.
Yeah.
That kind of surprised me. You know what's number 2?
No, I don't. Snickers.
Reese's. Yeah, I can see that because Reese's are really good with peanut butter on the inside, obviously. After that, number 3 is Chex Mix. Number 4 is Corn Nuts.
I don't know what a corn nut is.
Do I? But they're very popular.
Are you going to read the whole list? Or
no,
what?
I just want to tell you the top ones.
Okay,
but the healthy ones are like the Greek yogurt with fruit and the popcorn and the whole wheat toast with peanut butter.
Yeah.
So Bruce Springsteen's
By the way,
not far off.
Here's a text. Someone says, yes, in the current political climate, I find myself snacking much more on margaritas. That's Karen in Canton who sent that text. 877-301-897. And by the way, you can't just say my late night snack of choice is a slice of pizza, which by the way is horrible, but you have to explain why. What does it satisfy? And let me ask you before we get the listeners involved in this, is your snacking behavior changed because of the stress you're feeling because of the state of the world, or are you doing the same thing?
No.
Yeah.
Well, some people are stress eaters and some people aren't.
You know,
I'm stress movers. I'm a stress mover.
What do you mean by that? You move around?
Haven't you noticed that, Jim?
You know what I hadn't noticed that. You know what I love? I haven't said this, but this is actually great.
What?
You take one slice, thinly sliced Swiss cheese. You take a thinly sliced thing of like Genoa salami, and you wrap the cheese around the salami into like a wrap kind of thing, and you pop that baby in.
That's pretty good.
That is a great late night
I've had this.
snack.
I remember when I was a kid, people, when you were in your 20s, people would serve cheese, bologna wrapped around cheese.
Oh.
Cut up with a toothpick.
Does it get any better than that, by the way?
Pretty nasty.
That is like heaven on earth. Let's go to James.
Okay,
James in Worcester.
877-301-8970 is the number. Thank you for calling, James. Hi.
Hi, James.
Hi. It sounded like you were describing a pocket-sized antipasto salad with the Swiss cheese and the Genoa there, Jim.
I think that's close. That is actually correct. That's a very good analysis. Thank you. Go ahead.
I would say that popcorn, I will say, is my number one, and the reason why is specifically because it is stovetop popcorn. I get the big thing of Orville Redenbachers, the big thing of Colonels.
Those are
I put the canola oil on the pan, and I just it's like Jiffy Pop, but it's not going to kill you. Like Jiffy Pop is made of the worst chemicals you could ever imagine, but there's something about just a big old bowl of air, not quite air, but just a little bit of oil, just a little bit of salt.
Yeah.
And it's just the right thing. And even if it takes a little bit of extra effort in the middle of the night to make it, it works.
But let me, wait,
James. Snacking on that more.
Do you make it from scratch or do you make it in that pre-made thing where the aluminum foil expands into a big ball?
Oh, no. I was just ragging on Jiffy Pop. I make it homemade. Like,
you do? That's great.
Beerware pots that I do. Yeah.
Oh, I really admire you.
It makes a difference.
That's
crispy,
great.
Crunchy, delicious, just right.
Let me tell you, not only is it great, you describe it beautifully. James, that was an excellent call. Thank you. Mike on the road text. I've been snacking on a bottle of Tito's vodka nightly since the fall of democracy started.
Now, a couple of people are not responding to the question at hand. They're responding to your claim that you just happened to go by the house where poor John
I didn't
O'Keefe.
say it just happened.
Yeah.
I was in Canton for other reasons.
Well, you say
I did not drive to Canton.
And you say you were in other reasons at the sex store. Well, Pete from Hingham says, tell Jim I was in the strip club just asking for directions. And then another texter says, Jim says he did not buy a sex toy, but he didn't deny renting any.
Oh, that's so funny. Speaking of stripping, by the way, can I just say?
Certainly.
Next week, we're going to have a friend of ours, Lucy Whiteman.
Yes.
Who in her former life was Princess Cheyenne, who's probably the most famous stripper in the history, maybe of the world, but clearly of Boston. She's written a book about the early part of her life. I've read about half. It is spectacular. It's coming out next week. And Lucy's going to join us in the studio to talk about it.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
Have you tried to grill a peanut butter and jelly like you would grill a grilled cheese.
Have you?
No, but that's a great idea.
That is actually a fabulous idea.
Thank you for whoever sent that in. Okay, let's go to Izzy in Worcester. Thank you for calling.
Hi, I just want to say, from the time I was 16 years old, it was Hebrew National salami on fresh rye bread.
Oh my God!
Every night.
There you go.
And now I'm going. And now, wait a minute. And my mother said, if you keep doing that, you're not going to live very long. I am going to be 80 in August.
Showed her, Izzy.
It helps me live long.
That is gorgeous.
Well, you know,
that is a beautiful, lovely story. Thank you, Izzy.
Yeah, and Izzy, it's interesting that you talk about starting as a child, because a texter says that this person thinks late-night snack choices are rooted in childhood memories. So this explains Jim's love of highly processed meats, which allows him to regress to the late-night snacks of his youth.
That may be the case.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what else? I remember this when I was a kid. I grew up in my grandfather's house, and he had put saltines with cream cheese and jelly. He ate those like by the dozens.
Who'd you say?
My grandfather.
My grandfather, too. Honest to God.
Saltines.
My mother's father
cream cheese and
would
jelly.
have my grandparents. My parents got divorced. My mother's parents moved in with us for a couple of years. I totally forgot about this. My grandfather had saltines with peanut butter and jelly on them.
Yeah, and well, he did cream cheese and jelly.
Oh, peanut butter and jelly.
Peanut butter and jelly,
case,
but I've switched it up.
Something?
What?
It may have been cream cheese and jelly. That probably was much more popular then, right?
They also ate pig's feet. So I didn't try.
An anonymous texter says, "Here's my late night snacks: several squeezes of liverwurst, and I wear a dickie to keep my pajamas clean." I think they're making fun of somebody who shall remain unnamed.
Okay, Dan has a crucial question in Sudbury. Peanut butter crunchy or smooth? Now, that's a riveting segment from BPR. I couldn't resist.
Now, they're trying to criticize us for the trivia. This is not trivial. Everybody... By the way, there are a lot of nights where I don't have a late night snack because I think it's unhealthy. However, based on the reading they said today, even eating after 8 o'clock at night isn't necessarily unhealthy. It's okay, they say, as long as you're not eating something that's really horrible, like Izzy and I am eating, like salami sandwiches.
Let me tell you, last night I was reading all my stuff.
You were?
Work today. Yes,
Very
I was.
good.
After I get home from visiting my little grandchildren, and I get really hungry at about 10:30.
You did?
Yes.
That's really
and
great.
I reheated the pesto pasta that was in the fridge.
Well, pasta.
Parmesan cheese, a lot of Parmesan cheese. You notice how expensive Parmesan Reggiano was getting? Put that on there, and a little extra olive oil that I got from that olive oil store on Beacon Street where they have really fresh olive oil. It's a life changer.
You know, I want to read this one text before we get back to the calls, because Marjorie, I am offended by it, as I'm sure you know, goes out of her way to insult me based upon things I do for the show. I went to the sex shop in Toys R Us in Provincetown. I did it because everybody's talking about...
investigative
by the way, I
reporter.
don't even care about Jordan Hudson. Marjorie cares about Jordan Hudson, Trenny, Sue, whatever.
I didn't drive to Provincetown.
And so I was in Provincetown for the weekend anyway.
That's what he says.
And then so I went to Toys R Us and I asked for Jordan Hudson. I didn't ask for her mother. I said the name of her mother, and they said, "Who wants to know?" And I sort of walked out. But so Marjorie is ridiculing me for this. Here's an anonymous texter coming in my defense.
Okay.
Jim, there's really nothing wrong with sex toys, and you have nothing to be ashamed of, especially if you eat them as a late night snack. Certain items there are edible.
Okay.
Edible.
Really?
They are.
And the Eros, the sex store in Provincetown?
You know, some of those
there were
stores
edible
sell,
items?
you know what they sell?
What?
Edible underwear. And that is true. There is such a thing as edible underwear.
Are they made out of chocolate?
I haven't experienced it.
Yep.
And Jacques in France just texted and said, "I would like to buy a hamburger."
I would like to buy a hamburger.
Thank you very much. One of the great scenes ever. Let's go to Ellen in Westport. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
I used to have to drive from Westport to the Cape, Plymouth, and on the way home, I'd stop at Wendy's and have a double cheeseburger, bacon fries, and a small shake. And now I'm a type 2 diabetic.
Oh,
so,
Ellen.
Yeah, the fun is gone. It's all
Ellen, the
now.
fun may be gone. You have the best voice of practically any caller
It's a great
on the
call.
show. You
Yeah.
sound fabulous. Ellen, thanks for the call. We really appreciate it.
Listen to this from Laura in Cohasset. Have snack habits changed? Yes. I started to bake in January. I haven't stopped. I put down 3 chocolate cupcakes when I wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I ate 3 peanut butter and jellies before I fell asleep last night because there were no cupcakes left. Wow.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Read the top text. I don't think I can get through it. Read the top text on the screen there.
This is anonymous texter.
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you, Jim, but the sex shop is not where you go to buy a new dickie.
Thank you. It's a different kind of thing that I was talking about.
And,
Exactly.
the next texter, following the theme, wants to know, where do they make edible dickies?
Okay. Yeah, the problem is if you're a new listener, you have no idea what anybody's talking about.
Jim had a...
When I was younger, not Jim, every single teenager
all the bar mitzvahs
in my generation wore dickies.
Yep. Harriet Heinemann, his first dance with Harriet.
It wasn't the first dance. It wasn't the first. Or it was no dance with Harriet Heinemann. Okay.
He was wearing a dickie.
Okay, fine. Mary texts and says, "Oh my God, I've gained 10 pounds since the start of Trump 2.0. Popcorn, chocolate chip cookies, anything crunchy looks good from 8 p.m. on."
Yeah, well, the popcorn is supposed to be pretty good. Spicy food is supposed to be bad because it can cause your heart rate to increase, making it more difficult to fall asleep, according to these experts.
That's interesting.
So that's a bad idea. If dinner is spicy, have it on the earlier side so you can digest before you go to bed. And here's the kind of bottom line deal here.
What is it?
Well, if you're going to eat after dinner or right before you go to bed, choose foods with fiber, protein, healthy fat instead of sugar, greasy foods. So that kind of makes sense.
What's wrong with the greasy food? I mean, I understand grease isn't generally healthy, but what's wrong in particular?
Well, I think because it's not generally healthy. If you are trying to lose weight or manage diabetes, take an inventory of your late-night snacks to determine if they could be pushing you over your calorie or carb limit for the day and holding you back from reaching your goals. There
Can
you
I
go.
tell you, I left one thing out.
Yep.
One occasional late-night snack that is actually fairly healthy and fairly low-calorie. You ever had a Yasso Pop?
No, you told me about
These
those.
are yogurt pops. They're 80 to like 120 calories. They have fabulous flavors. They have really good texture. And you just pop them right in, you know what I mean? Kind of thing. You take a few bites, you go to sleep.
You know, we work across the street from the Lindt chocolate store.
Oh, my God.
And they're much fresher there than if you get them at
You don't know. You
CVS.
say that all the time.
Yes,
You
they
have
are.
no
I can
idea.
taste
No,
the
you
difference.
don't know
Yes,
that.
I can. They're fresher there at the store.
Okay.
I must have 200 of those in my cabinet.
Well, you know what the key is, by the way,
I
if
love 'em.
you're planning your Christmas shopping, you should wait till Christmas for fresh chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, if you go on the right day, you can not only buy a 250 ball pack and you put them in yourself.
Yeah.
Occasionally, it's 2 for 1 on the 250s.
Oh, wow.
So you can get 500 Lindt balls.
Doesn't get any
Let me tell
better
you,
than
that can
that.
last me a weekend. Really? By the way, I've never had a Lindt ball as a late night snack. Is that perfect?
That's my
Small?
dessert every night.
No, do you really have a Lindt ball?
Yes, I do.
Do you buy them across the street?
I have
It's the
several.
thing?
Yes, I do. I have them in my cabinet.
Okay, we're
I have
talking
about 200 of them.
We're talking
different flavors.
We're talking
The
late
best
night
ones are the
snacks,
ones with
sort of.
salt on them. Those are the best ones.
Okay, good. Let's
Rick
go to Rick
from the South End. Hi, Rick.
Hello, Rick.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. I have a snack.
Okay.
You take a bowl, all right, and this is like divine food, and you put a giant plop of natural peanut butter in it, not the kind that has sugar in it, just ground peanuts. All
Yeah.
right? Then you get a plop of marshmallow fluff, and it's got to be the fluff from Made in Lynn, or it doesn't work. And then you stir it. You don't mix it completely. You just stir it in. And that takes care of whether you can't decide if you want something sweet or salty.
Very
And
good.
It's all the basic food groups right there. Peanut butter and fluff.
Very good.
You know what I love about you, Rick? I love somebody who
Passion.
thinks through. Well, not
Passion.
just passion, but thinks as clearly and comprehensively as you did about a conundrum that faces many people. Rick, that was brilliant. Thank you for sharing your analysis with us. I appreciate
A lot of
it.
people are also mentioning ice cream, which is a very popular snack late at night.
But that can't be good.
No, it's not good. Peanut butter is better, and a lot of people are really into peanut butter. Kevin in New Bedford does the peanut butter on hot toast with honey, so you get sweet, crunchy, and chewy all at once.
Well, wait till you see this next guy. This sounds spectacular. Tom on the Cape, what's your late night snack of choice?
Oh, this is a first-time caller, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't be embarrassed about what you're calling about, even though some might say you should be. Go ahead.
This is so delicious, and this show is making me so hungry.
I'm so glad.
But listen, this is a great snack for midnight or even for breakfast.
What is
I'll
it?
tell you, everybody loves French toast.
Yes.
But you make a sandwich, peanut butter sandwich, and dip it in egg and fry it up like a French toast.
Oh my God!
With some powdered sugar and some syrup, and we have peanut butter French toast. You can't get any better than that.
Ooh. Ooh, okay, hold on. So you make the French toast, and then you can take the 2 pieces of French toast, you put the peanut butter in the middle, and then put it in the fry pan, and like you're making French toast in the fry pan.
Don't forget the syrup.
Yeah, you take 2 pieces of bread with the peanut butter inside, like a peanut butter sandwich, dip it in egg, make the French toast, and it's complete with powdered sugar and syrup, however you like your French toast. Put some strawberries on top. Perfect.
That's a good one.
Well, you know why it's perfect? Because it's so good for you, too, Tom, don't you think?
Oh, wonderful.
Exactly.
Very nutritious.
Tom, thank you. That actually sounds, I don't know if I'd have that late at night. How delicious does that sound?
It sounds excellent. People are
You
concerned.
make French toast. You seem like a French toast kind of person.
Oh, I've made tons of French
Why
toast
not?
in my
I would figure.
day.
It's your kind of thing, yeah.
A lot of French toast for the kiddos.
Yeah.
I also love to make ricotta pancakes.
Oh, really?
Oh, my God. Those are
Do
just
you ever,
wonderful.
what's that thing, French thing called with a hole in the middle kind of thing, with the egg in the middle thing? What's that called? Jacques? No, not
Oh, croque monsieur.
Croque monsieur.
Or croque
How great is that?
mademoiselle. One
Which
has
is
got
that
ham and one doesn't or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a female and a male.
I got
croque,
it. Okay,
croque, or however
fine.
you say it.
Keep croque. Croque.
You know,
Croque monsieur. You're right.
a person that's bringing this up is
Who is
saying, what do we do about brushing your teeth? If you're going to have those sweet things, I suppose maybe you should go brush your teeth before you get back into bed.
Nate in Worcester says, I'm pretty sure edible underwear is usually made of a fruit roll-up type food. Yeah, but your body gets a little sticky as part of the problem in the thing there. Let's go to Allison in Webster. Hello, Allison. Welcome to the show.
Hello. You guys bring me such joy. I want you to know that.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you.
So my go-to is a bowl of cereal. Depending on my mood, I go grape nuts. If I'm angry, get that crunch out, or I'll go sweet with something super sugary. And then finally, just so you know, the Catholics wore Dickies too. You're not alone, Jim.
I know, a different kind of
Now,
Dickies.
Allison, what do you do about the toothbrushing dilemma? Do you brush your teeth
That's
again?
a great one.
Or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you got to, unless you want to be gumming the stereo by the time I'm 80. And I'd
That's a
rather
beautiful
not,
image. Thank you. Hey, that was great, Allison.
You know,
Thank you very much.
Somebody just texted they have peanut butter with pickles, and they're not pregnant because you think of pickles and pregnant women.
No, I love pickles.
I couldn't do
and
it.
I like peanut butter.
I couldn't do it. We have a lot of people that
think
like
so.
those yasso. How do you say those pops?
Yasso
that you're eating?
pops,
Yeah. Okay.
You know, peanut butter is the winner so far in this discussion. Are you aware of that? Are you keeping score?
Peanut butter is well. How is it not? I mean, I'm into the. I haven't had Skippy peanut butter in like a
You're
decade.
like into Teddy's.
Yeah, Teddy's at the moment.
Locally
Smucker's.
made, by the way.
Yep, Teddy's is locally made. So is Fluff Nutter locally made. It was started in Somerville,
So
right?
now it's in Lowell. Where is it now?
I don't know. It's somewhere around here.
Yeah.
And you know, I could go crunchy. I could go smooth. It's either way. But there's all sorts of really good fresh peanut butter, and once you have it, you can't go back.
Here's actually a pretty timely text, considering we're talking about the environment. This is from Stephen Miller. He's texting from D.C. He says, my favorite late night snack is hate spread liberally on white bread. That's honest and good. I think that's good.
I think he had a tough time in high school. Don't you
I
think?
told you. You've seen and I've seen his racist speeches
Didn't he
when he's
run for
running for
office?
the presidency of the high school.
Did he win?
I don't know, but he was campaigning against the Latino janitor, essentially saying the janitor should pick up the crap in the lunchroom or somewhere rather than the kids. Annie and Gardner, you're going to finish this thing off. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey there. Okay, you take some Ghirardelli bittersweet chocolate chips in a ramekin.
Yeah.
You nuke them just enough to melt them. Chop up your favorite apple. Dip the apples in. And I'm telling you, it's everything. It's crunchy and refreshing. It's yummy and sweet and, chocolate. And if I need protein, I'll throw in some nuts.
That is
Very
a beautiful
good.
ending to a beautiful discussion. That is great.
I used to give this to my kids when they were little and they needed, some kind of dessert.
Yeah.
And I'd throw in the apples because, fruit and all that.
I understand the fruit.
But they loved the dipping action, and I do too. I'm a kid at heart, and just the dipping thing is so satisfying as well as everything else.
That is a fabulous
That's
recipe.
that's
Thank
a
you,
good one,
Annie.
Annie. And here's another sort of healthy one from Mike in Wichita. He does cucumbers with feta cheese and a little balsamic dressing.
Can I tell you something? Feta cheese on almost anything, except peanut butter is great. Let's ask Jared what he thinks. Jared, what is your favorite late night salad? Oh, he's not
Is Jared
here.
around, or are we not doing? Is Jared around? Okay, hey Jared, you there?
That was the day I got the wrong time for Jared. This is not the wrong time, is it? Where the hell's Jared?
I don't know. Maybe he has a day off.
Do you like feta cheese or do you not like
I
feta
love feta cheese. I love every kind of cheese.
Can I give you a really good idea?
You know what I got the other day at Trader Joe's? Half cheddar, half Gruyere. Wow.
That is incredible.
It's a new frontier.
On what? What'd you get it on?
I just got a slab of it. I'm going to take it home and stuff it right in.
Can I give you, since you can't cook anything, can I give you an idea? You buy a piece of pita bread. You with me?
Yep.
This can all be made at the cold bar at the fresh, what is it called? Whole Foods. You spread a little hummus on a pita thing. You then throw the feta. The feta is always spiced feta at the little thing there. And then you take a piece of falafel and crush it. And you have hummus, falafel, and spicy feta from the salad bar
I tell you,
at Whole Foods. Is that amazing?
You're just the male version of Julia Childs every day. Bringing this food.
The male.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Listen to this one. Peanut butter and M&Ms in the toaster oven for a minute, then eat with a cold glass of milk.
Well, that woman at Chris Cold, that was better.
My favorite late night snack, a piece of bologna with a dollop of horseradish sauce wrapped around a pickle.
Wow. Our listeners really know how to live.
I tell you, they really do. Okay, Jared is not coming, so we're
Josh
done.
in Waltham says, I just listened to the BPR podcast late at night because Jim is a real snack.
Oh, that's a good one, Josh.
That is such a moving
We'd like
text.
to tell
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, Jared is not here today, but the Culture Show does come. I don't know. Maybe he has a day off. The Culture Show comes on right after us with Jared or without Jared. I'm not sure.
Whoever it is.
You can keep up with 24/7 by way of our podcast or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Thank you so much
right now
for tuning in. Are you eating? Good for you, Jim. That's good. That's good. I have my smoothie over there, you know.
That's really nice.
It's unbelievable. It's spectacular. Tune in tomorrow. We're live at the Boston Public Library with CNN's John King, Boston Medical Center's Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett, Embrace Boston's Amari Paris Jeffries, and Giselle Bird of the Theater Offensive ahead of the Embrace Ideas Festival. We're going to hear all about that, and NBC Sports Boston's Trenny Casey. We want to thank our great crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John LaClaw Parker. Patrick Lally runs our YouTube stream, and our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. The Culture Show, as I said, with Jared Bowen is going to start immediately after us here on 89.7. Merritt from Somerville asked, what about lint balls fresh from the dryer?
Oh, that's funny. By the way, a number of people after I mentioned are texting and asking about Lucy's book, or who'll be with us next week. It's coming out next week in pre-order. It's Louise is her former first name. Louise Whiteman, Princess Cheyenne, My Life is Boston's most famous stripper, and it is fabulous.
Eric in Haverhill says, I'm really enjoying this distraction from the collapse of our democracy. Thanks so much. Love you guys. Yeah, we like the distractions too, I must admit.
We need it. Everybody needs it.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browder.
Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you can tune in tomorrow and have a great afternoon.
Is Jared around, or are we not doing? Is Jared around? Okay, hey Jared, you there?
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham. Their leading heart and vascular specialists are committed to providing breakthrough care to patients with cutting-edge research and innovative treatments. Learn more at massgeneralbrigham.org/heart. Ken Burns calls it America's best idea, and you may have already experienced it. Now learn the fascinating behind-the-scenes stories surrounding his most beloved documentary series. It's the National Parks tonight at 7:30 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org.